tangata, kei te kaupapa o te hui nei, kei te kaupapa o te rangi nei, moriora kia tātou katoa. Bind above, bind below, bind within, bind beyond, bind us the people to the purpose of our meeting, to the purpose of this day, breathe life into all of us. So as I said, welcome. I do note we have two councillors this morning on Zoom, Councillor Hill and Councillor Greening. Just a reminder that because we are on Zoom, this meeting, microphones need to be muted unless you're speaking. Put your hands up if you wish to ask a question. The meeting is being recorded and will be available on the council's YouTube channel. We do have the media present. Just a reminder of the fire exits out these doors here, and toilets through these doors and out there to my left. We will get underway. So we do have a total of 3 presentations this morning, and we're going to start off with those. Our meeting is scheduled to go through to 12:30, and councillors, we do have another meeting at 1 o'clock. Lost my pen. Oh, there it is. I will be trying to manage our time this morning, so if you could just bear that in mind. Firstly, apologies. So we have an apology for lateness from Deputy Mayor Bryant and also from Councillor Maru. So if I could have a mover for those apologies, please. Move Councillor Dowler, seconded Councillor Walker. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. We have no registered speakers this morning in the public forum. If I could call for any declarations of interest with respect to today's items. It would appear there are no declarations of interest. We do have 2 late items here. One is the Kahurangi journey, a presentation, the use of artificial intelligence in road defect identification and tracking. And then we have a late paper that has also been put up in LG Hub, which is the customer services update part of the Libraries and Community Partnerships update report. If I could have a mover for those late items, please. Move. No, not moved. Yes, Councillor Ellis.
Sorry, I just haven't received any of those items, and none of my agendas are working, and everything was disappeared. Just so that you're aware, I'm trying to.
All right.
Around to other people because I haven't had a chance to see them at all.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Thank you. Is there a mover for those late items? Moved Councillor Dowler, seconded Councillor Butler. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. We have no minutes to confirm. They will be done at the next scheduled operations committee meeting. So that will take us straight to our first presentation, Mike Van Enter. So thank you. I shall hand over to you and to Jamie.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the slides are mostly self-explaining, so I was planning to take that as read and can answer some questions. It's got a few key observations from that. So New Zealand's towards the wrong end of the when comparing against other countries in terms of crash rate. Local road crashes tend to be a greater proportion on our rural roads. Alcohol and lost control in bends the most common crash factors and crash types on our local roads. Tasman District compares about the average when comparing against our other, when comparing nationally against other districts. Motorcycle crashes are significantly overrepresented. And the most effective engineering interventions are relatively expensive compared to our budgets. So those are the key points. I'm happy to answer any questions on the slides.
Thank you very much, Mike. Councillor Maru, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mike. I've just got really one question, and it's what page is it on? I'm not sure, but it's a typical Tasman road deaths or serious injuries with the speed limit count and the percentages. So just wanted to understand percentage of roads. I suspect we've got a high percentage of 50-kilometre roads compared to 60-kilometre roads, but I'm unsure of our percentage of 80-kilometre roads to 100-kilometre roads in terms of distances and lengths, because I see I get the speed count in terms of numbers, but I was just trying to understand the relativity to the number of roads we have at those speed limits compared to the number of crashes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, correct. Yeah, the graph's just showing what percentage of our roads have what speed limits, and yeah, comparing that against crashes to see if there's any trend. I think it kind of reflects the data set from before, showing that most of our crashes on our rural roads, so therefore in that 80 and 100 km speed limit.
Yeah, so through the chair, so do you know a percentage of how many of our rural roads are 80k and how many are 100k currently? I'm just trying to compare apples with apples. Would we have more 100k or more 80k kilometres of roads?
Yeah, that's what that data shows. So hard to see, but oh, you're right. This is VKT, so vehicle kilometre travelled on those roads. So you're right. I don't have the data showing the length.
Just because I take something that Jamie said once before, that any crash and serious crash is one crash too many, but I was just trying to.
Yes, Channel.
Good morning. I just heard kind of comment question about wide centre lines. From a few people that I know that ride motorcycles, they often think that they're actually motorcycle lanes. So I wonder whether the comms around what they are, because I didn't learn it in my road code, need to be told what they actually are for.
Yeah, I think that's good feedback. We obviously don't have any wide centre lines on our local roads, but they were on the state highways as part of bit of a pre-treatment as well to the central median barriers that have been installed. But yeah, potentially some more comms around that. I know that they got that feedback as well when they implemented those wide centre lines.
Yes, very good point. All right, well, look, I mean, I think it's really good to get the data and the analysis. I mean, I think speed limits are certainly on the top of their minds in terms of where we go, but that will be a topic for another day, I guess. So thanks very much, Mike. Look, we've just got, I do want those questions. Right, okay, so we do have some questions. Sorry about that. Anyway, we've got Councillor Butler, Councillor Walker, Councillor Dowler and Councillor Greening. So let's start off with Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the report. Just, you know, from a Golden Bay perspective, you know, we have just so many motorbikes coming to the bay and going back again. Like they come in the weekends and like 30 at a time, and they'll come over and, you know, have coffee and that kind of thing, and then all go back again. And so combining that with the high rate of accidents on rural roads and the high rate of motorbike accidents, I'm just wondering about the attendance at the motorbike education sessions that we run, and it's really good to know that those are happening. And I'm just wondering, what is the reach? You may not know, but I'm just wondering what the reach of those is out into the community. I don't know whether the cohorts of motorbikes that come over are from Nelson or from the Tasman region, or whether they're coming from away, but I think quite a lot of them are coming from from Nelson, Tasman, Richmond area, over and back. Yep.
Yeah, we've had quite what I would call a strong motorcycle safety program that has been delivered over a number of years now. And the reason I say it's strong is because some of the activities that we've delivered have been very popular with motorcyclists. So there's breakfasts that have been arranged, based around some of the local motorcycle retailers, and to attract motorcyclists there. There's barbecues and giveaways and experts who will provide some advice for free on how to service your bike, how to tune it to make sure it's as safe as it can be. And we've had hundreds and hundreds of participants at those. So it's been really, really good. Like, we don't know exactly how many motorcyclists there are in the district, but I'd say the reach has been quite strong. And also we've had hundreds of people subsidised to go through the Ride Forever training. And so that's been a real success. It's going to get tougher because some of the funding that has been used by ourselves, police and ACC to fund some of those activities has been reduced. So we're not going to be able to deliver as many activities as we used to. So the challenge is to try and keep reaching out and talking to the right people in a constrained funding environment. But, our road safety coordinator is very, very active in that space.
Thanks for that. A location could be the Roots Bar on a Sunday morning. Sometimes there's 20 motorbikes lined up there. Just an idea, thought.
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, through your chair. It's interesting, the slide that you've put up about the, despite a peak in number of crashes involving our 15 to 25-year-olds, that Tasman Roads is less than the national mean. Can we quantify how much education we're putting around defensive driving? So I know that there was a period of time that TDC was able to help support that. And so that's my first question. And my second one is, I wonder what our stats are going to be when we start reducing the education and what we've been able to provide. Do we have any idea of what that impact? I mean, it's kind of like crystal ball gazing, I know, but there will be an impact. Can we?
Through the chair, it's really hard to measure our impact. How do you measure a crash that you prevented? We've suffice to say, again, our road safety coordinator is adjusting what we do within the young driver space. So I think in the report, later in our update report, we talk about some of the upcoming initiatives, and that involves getting into schools and engaging directly with schools, along with the police, community constable, and providing some really raw experiences for those young drivers to understand or hear and see and feel what it means to be involved in a crash. So there's some really cool stuff happening there. So we're continuing. We're just having to adjust what we deliver based on the funding we have. So it might be less about funding defensive driving courses or helping enable some of those really rural, underprivileged people from being supported to get their license, to just getting into schools and engaging more generally.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell.
Yeah, just comment on the reporting of the drug use. Just pre-COVID, I was talking with Senior Constable Grant Andrews, who was looking after the traffic unit in Stoke at that stage, and we were having just a yarn over a coffee actually, and he was saying that he was getting concerned about the number of fatals caused by drug impaired people. The Tasman district he looked after went right down the west coast, but they'd had 17 fatal motor accidents in a recent period of time at that stage. and 9 were positively tested of the drivers being affected by drugs. So that was over 50%. And unfortunately, 3 of those crashes were actually in the Tasman district as well at the time. So it really concerns me that we're not getting the stats regarding the drug stuff properly, and we're getting alcohol and drug. But I think we should be able to get better from the police in that situation. So just that's my comment. Can we get better information or not?
Yeah, I think that's right. We also obviously talked to our local police on that, and there are changes afoot on the way drug testing is being done roadside. So it is right now, the testing and the reporting will be far better. This historic data set is exactly as you realise it's lagging. But that changes are afoot, and potentially get an update from our police on exactly where that's at. But it's a changing state, and it's
Well, most people when they're killed in a car accident get a blood test anyway, so that's where they come up with the fact that the person. The other thing that can amuses me is when we do these reporting, probably 15 years ago, I suppose, and we had a very high road toll one year with a record breaker. One of the policemen, I think from memory, I was still in Ashburton, I can't remember, turned around and says, I don't know what we're worried about. China has more road deaths in a day than that. And yet China never shows any of our records.
Right, thank you. Councillor Greening.
Yeah, thanks. Did note the trend which you've also highlighted in your oral summary, which was a focus on rural areas and bends. I'm wanting to know whether we've got a firm idea of those areas in the rural areas where we consider that there are high risks. So we've identified these areas where there are bends and where there are high crash incidents. I'm just wondering whether, and I'm conscious of the fact, validly made, that some of the interventions like continuous barriers can be rather expensive, and probably motorcycles don't necessarily like those because they probably decapitate the cyclists rather than save them. But I just wonder whether there's opportunities to improve visibility, because clearly a bend is probably either driven by visibility or grip. And probably there's a factor of speed as well. So I'm just wondering whether those low cost interventions like improving visibility on bends, increasing awareness coming into a bend, and improving grip, things that we might be able to focus on, as well as identifying those areas where those factors come into play, where we can really focus. So targeted investment in those kind of areas.
Yeah, absolutely. The crashes are very dispersed across the network, so we do look for any repeating trends, and that's an easy thing to go and target and fix if that happens. But unfortunately, they are dispersed across the whole network, so it's exactly that. It's road types, and signage is one of the low-cost interventions that we can go away and focus on.
So
in terms of corridors,
in terms of the bends, like we're getting a trend of, as you've said, bends, which I suspect could be a mixture of visibility, speed, and grip. So if we've got a type, are we able to identify actually these are the type of road accidents that are occurring on this type of bend? And by the way, we've got a few other bends that are very similar. Do we look at that rather than just go, oh, we've had an incident on this road?
Yeah, that's what this attempts to do is, we've lowered the speed limit on a few of our rural roads to 80, and that kind of is an indication of the road type. So we have exactly that, looked at our road types, our rural road types, to see where crashes are happening. But it's across our rural high-speed roads, essentially.
Yes, I mean, a lot of rural roads are probably grip and visibility, so I just wonder whether we can also look at those types of interventions as well.
Yeah, so one thing Mike has done in recent times is go out and assess these rural roads that tend to be higher risk, and check the one form of visibility is, can a driver adequately read the road that's ahead of them? You know, can they see what's coming? And And we've retrofitted improved delineation, so that's edge mark posts, signs, edge lines, and centre lines, just to make sure that the road is as readable as possible. But there does come a point where you just can't do any more within the funding envelopes that are available.
And has grip been a factor in those bends, or is it just visibility and speed?
Yeah, well, I mean, lots of crashes happen when the vehicle loses control, which means that is the side friction being caused by its speed and its angle exceeds the grip that the tyres get off the road. We do measure that through the skid resistance tester. But again, retrofitting, a surface that's starting to get slightly more slippery is not always affordable. So yeah, we do try and amend our reseal program to take into account really bad sites, but there's again a limit.
I'm just wondering whether some areas can be put in. I think you've given a picture of areas which have added grip and are differently coloured, which I think is also a warning sign for someone coming into a corner. So I think those kind of initiatives would be worth exploring a bit more.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. So I think we've got two more questions on this, and then we need to move on. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Hi, Jamie. Thank you so much for the report. I'm just curious. I've got a couple of questions. They're a bit jumbled because all my notes have finished with my lovely technological issues this morning. I had a question. I note I've spoken to some motorbike riders and they've been involved in some pretty serious accidents, and it was actually the condition of the road that caused their accidents, but it hasn't shown through in this. I'm just curious as to why that difference, because anecdotally I'm hearing one thing and it's not showing in the report. Two, given that we had some roads identified that were high risk in the region and we looked to lower their speed limits through the speed management plan, what is moving forward if we're identifying those roads, and what can we do about them into the future? And it's also great to see that there's been a 93% reduction in deaths on the road between Nelson and Blenheim, which is quite a significant road we all travel relatively frequently. For many people in the district, does that carry through to all of the roads that we've seen the 80k speed limit drop on? I'm thinking, for an example, between Blenheim and Picton, I mean, there's been quite some substantial issues. So is that statistic carrying through in general, or is it just that road?
I can say, that was the crash stats of the study done by NZTA post that change, and those studies are pretty useful. To do a similar thing on our local roads is difficult. The crash numbers, total crash numbers, luckily on our 80 km roads is relatively low. So to see any statistical trends from that is difficult to do. So, and we did look at how many crashes are happening on our 80 km roads. Again, like I say, just a graph there showing it, but the total numbers on our local roads are quite low. So to see a change within a year or two is probably asking too much of the numbers.
Around your first question around the factors involved in the crashes. So the data that gets recorded in the national database, the crash analysis system, is based on what the attending police officer puts in their report. So we don't have control over what the police officer puts in their report as the contributing factors. Yeah. I could imagine that some motorcyclists that crash will blame the road, whether that's correct or not.
Thank you, Jamie. All right. Thank you. All right. Is it something that we need to deal with now? Or can you take it offline? I'm really conscious of time this morning. Thank you. Councillor Kinnamonth, quick question.
In the interest of brevity, I withdraw my question.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, I mean, you know, it's a topic of great interest, as you can see. So thank you very much, Mike and Jamie, for bringing the data to this committee. All right, we're going to move on now. Fulton Hogan. We have so Jamie, you might like to introduce this topic and introduce staff.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, my apologies for the apparent lateness of this. I hadn't put it into the agenda as soon as I had meant. So we've got here Salil and Willie from Fulton Hogan. Salil is the contract manager for the local roads in Golden Bay and Murchison. So he's based here in Nelson, and Willie is in Fulton Hogan's national office working on, I guess, national initiatives that Fulton Hogan then bring to each of their clients. So I'll let these guys take it away. Bye.
Good morning all, and thank you to Chair and the Operations Committee for giving us the opportunity to do our presentation. Salil, I'm Contract Manager for Fulton Hogan Kahurangi, and joining us is Willie. Willie's part of Fulton Hogan's National Engineering Solutions team, subject matter expert and brains behind RE, Fulton Hogan's AI tool to do road inspections. I'll quickly jump into our presentation. I'm going to go through a quick Kahurangi contract glance, touch on unsealed grading maintenance, and Willie will take over from me to talk about sealed road inspections with AI. Kahurangi contract is procured via Tasman Journey Knox State Highway contract. It includes Golden Bay and Murchison local roads. We do have our own offices and depots there. 22 staff across the network with diggers, trucks, and graders to the respective depots. We combined these two contracts were separate, but from 1st of Jan 2022, we combined these two contracts and they run as one under Kahurangi. When we changed to Kahurangi, we changed the contract model to be a bit more collaborative. So that brings a combined approach to adding value and also some room to do some innovation and some cool stuff, which we'll go through now. With 2/3 of our network being unsealed, so I thought I'll quickly touch into a few of the things which we are doing in unsealed road management. Traditionally, we do standard grading runs, means starting from one end and finishing on the other end, but we switched to a new method called inspect and grade. So our grader drivers are actually inspecting the network in their utes and deciding which road needs to be graded. And then, of course, the consultation with the local manager, and then we do those roads. The effects being we are more productive and efficient. That translates to cost savings at the end. And also this avoids overgrading. So with overgrading comes loss in metal, which is an additional cost. So we're trying to avoid those things. With the results, what we're doing at the moment, we have been monitoring the CSRs for last 3 months related to grading. We haven't seen any influx in those CSRs yet. So if there are any influx, we will address it accordingly. Another cool innovation that Fulton Hogan's implemented on our network, I just wanted to show that we have started using serrated grading blades. So if you see the photo on your right-hand side, the grader blades got hair comb-like structure at the end. So with these hair comb-like structure, what happens, the metal gets spread across evenly along the width of the blade. That means the bigger metal will fall into the right place. And also it makes it easy to capture the metal from the sides and the shoulders and bring it onto the lane as well. One good thing about this is it does help into getting into that bedrock where your traditional cutting blades jump over those rocks sometimes or drag them across the grader, along the grader. Another cool thing about this is it brings up those fines to the top surface, leaving a really good top surface finish. As you could see at the back of the grader, the road looks like it's been freshly metalled. With this, I will ask Willie to take over. He'll talk more about sealed road inspections.
Thanks, Sal. Yeah, so traditionally we have a problem with kind of our traditional method of inspections by humans. because we're contractors, the information that they picked up is really job centric, what we're going to do in the next 18 months. And we want to use this information for multiple purposes, particularly asset management. And some of that is about knowing stuff before we actually want to fix it so that we can make the correct decisions at the right time. It's a slow process, right? It's someone driving in a vehicle very slowly, getting out often, having to collect information manually on a tablet. It's slow. They get into the live lane, which means that they're inherently putting their safety at risk. So it's one of those things that is slow and does cause safety issues. And it can be inconsistent, right? We might have multiple inspectors out there who have different levels of experience, and even if it is just one, what they're going to pick up at 7 a.m. on Monday when they're bright and happy is going to be very different to what they pick up at 3 p.m. on a Friday when they're just thinking about that beer, right? So we decided that artificial intelligence was a really good and unique way to pick this up. And what I want to do is just kind of take a little bit of a step back, because AI is mentioned heaps now, right? Like you hear it all the time. It is a bit of a buzzword, but sometimes we don't necessarily know exactly what that means. So I just want to quickly take you through what is artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is when a machine mimics or displays human-like capabilities, such as visual differentiation, learning, and problem solving. There's quite a few fields of AI. As you can see up there, there's about 6. The one that we're primarily dealing with Fulton Hogan's ARI is the computer vision. Just to give you an understanding of what computer vision is, that's where we take an image library with multiple images, we detect objects on those images, and then we give them to a machine so that when it gets new images, it can identify those objects on those images. So what are the benefits of this? So it moves from job-centric to fault-centric. So as soon as it reaches our determined fault level, we can see that information. And that means that we can use this for multiple purposes, whether or not this is network level condition rating, using it for our 10-year forward work programs, for our reseals, or in Sal's case, using it for job management as well. And then we get speed and consistency. For a network this size, typically you'd be looking at 3 to 4 months to do a collection. The traditional method, Sal did this in about 2 to 3 weeks by the video, and it's at network speed. So it's not, there's not a human out on the roads potentially slowing down the traffic, putting himself in harm's way. It is quite literally a camera at network speed collecting that information, and therefore it's all collected in a point in time. So it's much more useful from an asset management perspective as well. So just to give you kind of a more specific example, being your guys' network. So we did a collection about this time last year, and I'll just give you a bit of a demo on kind of how it works. So this is the system. You can see all the faults on the map. You're able to zoom into any individual fault, see what the image detected. So you can see it's detected cracking there in the left-hand lane. Then because, AI tech isn't perfect, we have the ability to then edit information that it collects, such as the severity of the fault, the type of the fault, and the size of the fault, and then we can accept and reject. Then I use that in my back end to help retrain the model so Sal doesn't have to do as much of that going forward. So we're constantly iterating on the model. The videos are available in the back end, so we can use those videos for anything else. So that video is stored forevermore. And then lastly, we can export that information out so it can be used in a council's GIS system, or in most cases for us, the job and asset management system being RAM. Just to give you a quick understanding of what kind of RE sees, so this is happening in real time. Takes a video, it's picking up kind of the faults. And we can see, a lot of New Zealand roads are quite heavily flushed, so it is very good at flushing, but you can see it's just going to stop here in a second. You can see it picks up cracking within the flushing as well. So picking up all the road condition faults that are of importance to our network. I just thought I'd be a little bit interactive here and try something a little bit different. Anyone have any idea what 7007 could mean in the context of this?
Maybe a number of faults.
Oh, that was too easy, wasn't it? So that was the total number of faults that were accepted by Sal's quality assurance program for 270 Ks of network. So that number can be really daunting for our teams. It's quite hard, like unless you're zooming into particular parts of the road, that can be a really daunting number to handle. So one of the things that we did as a result of the information we collected is come up with a bit of a condition index to decide, hey, where do we need to send our focus, right? So you can see the roads in green, south of Golden Bay here. All those roads are relatively good from a fault perspective. We don't need to spend a lot of time on that, but you can see the Abel Tasman area, that's in the orange and red colours. That's somewhere that we do need to spend a lot of our time because there is a lot more fault density there. And those faults are weighted by what's important. For instance, flushing isn't as important from a condition perspective. It is from a safety perspective in some cases, but from a condition perspective, cracking and potholes is a lot more important. Therefore, it was kind of weighted. And the same with our severities. Just a couple of quick things on the next steps. In the interest of time, I don't want to take too long. Repeated surveys. So now that we have a baseline, we're hoping to do we're doing a survey currently, I believe, Sal. Yep. And that'll give us kind of, hey, how has the last year gone? We can see, is the network deteriorating? Is it improving, et cetera, et cetera? Making this data available in RAM. So that's something that we've worked on so that our teams can have that data at their fingertips and make decisions based off it. And that's where Sal's going to start utilising this for job creation. So another, getting the guys off the ground, not only for an inspection, but they can use it from the job management perspective. Just a bit of an example here. This was Most PP Road, which you can see quite a few faults collected on it. And it's good to see that these faults have kind of been fixed with renewal site in the last kind of 6 months. So a really good example of kind of collecting that information and then being able to utilise it. I am going to skip through the stuff because I'm aware of time, but just to give you a bit of example, this is Christchurch City. We did a blind trial with a human and we got to about 90% accuracy in terms of what the human picked up from jobs and what the computer determined, well, what someone determined based off the faults. So in the realms of programming differences, it's a really good number. What's really interesting is this one, the site wasn't as bad. So you can see a human hasn't picked up a lot of faults at all on the bottom side, but we go back to this one, there's a lot of faults there. So that's that asset management drive. We needed to know that information from an asset management perspective. It's a little bit hard to tell the cracking there, but I'll obviously give this to the team to share. But that stuff's really important from an asset management perspective. I think I'll stop there in the interest of time, but if there's any questions, please feel free to question either me or Sal. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Look at that. I mean, it's fascinating. And I mean, honestly, we've probably got a lot of questions that we might like to ask that we're not going to have time for, but it is incredible to see what's actually happening. But so we could have one question if it was really, really burning. Councillor Dowler.
Thank you. Back to your unsealed road management. It's not very often I get really, really excited sitting at this table, but that got me going. I would explain the reason why. The grader or the tip system that you're using, I used to be a branch manager West Coast Goffinhamer back in the mid-1990s, and that was when Caterpillar introduced the grader bit system, and most of the mines over there picked it up. When I came back here and got on community board, I was able to attend the engineering meetings here quite regularly, and I used to ask the transportation manager quite regularly, why aren't we using the grader bit system to do our shingle roads? Fobbed off. I've been here 18 years and we still don't have a grader bit system. I have mentioned it to you once, Jamie, when you first become in the chair, a long time ago now though, mate, but I don't expect you to remember that, but I don't let it go. So my question, I know what these things do. I've seen the results on mine roads down the West Coast, and it's absolutely amazing what it does compared to what the old blade did. It's the grader bit system that Caterpillar put out, is the official name. Anyway, do you just use the one setup, or do you do there's about 5 or 6 different setups you can use for different situations? I can imagine that it would be daunting to change it for every road that you had to do. And number 2, are you finding that the fines and that are working really, really well?
So one, health and safety perspective of these are not that heavy, so they can be interchangeable. These blades are not that helpful when you do have to do heavy cuttings. So that's when you switch on to your regular cutting blades. So that's what we'll be doing. And the stuff that we have done for past 3 months where we have used it, Henihaka Road is the one that I personally went and monitored it when they were grading it. It looked really good. So we are getting good results, but for heavy cutting, we don't use these ones. We have to switch over to the normal cutting blades.
They have a tendency to break under the heavy cut.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, it's got its purpose, but yeah, I'm just talking about the finisher and not what you're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dowler. So, all right, well, as I said, thank you very much. I mean, I think what will be good to see is eventually when these AI tools actually start reducing costs, that'll be a plus. So thank you very much. And thank you, Jamie, for organising that. All right. We're now going to move to our third presentation, which is local water done well. Jeff, thank you very much. I'll get you to introduce our consultants. Thank you. And so we've got a presentation. And so I suggest what we do is that we go through the presentation and then we will have any questions at the end. So over to you. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. So with local water done well, we went out to tender 2 months ago and to seek expert services. And the successful team was a combination of Becca, Maffick and Martin Jenkins. And they're going to present the slides this morning. So I'd just like to introduce Lorraine Kendrick from Becca and Nick Davis from Martin Jenkins. And have we got Campbell online?
Yes, yeah, I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, okay, we've got, all right, okay. So over to you. So you just need to.
Kia ora, Lorraine Kandituka Ingoa. Lovely to be here today on a nice sunny Nelson morning. The sunshine has come out, which is good. So we're going to kind of take you through. Now, how do we move the slides? Work. Yeah, perfect. So we're going to take you through the local done well. Look, I know you're already familiar with it, and Richard has brought previous council reports to you, so we won't spend a lot of time on that. We will drop into what is the requirement in regard to these water service delivery plans that are now in the Act, and they are now in the legislation that you need to complete. We'll talk quickly around consultation, and that is definitely a hot topic, particularly for yourselves and your community, and how are you going to tackle that. We'll have a look at what options are available in regard to service delivery arrangements moving forward. We'll touch base on some of the decision-making processes that you will need to consider throughout this process. And then we'll kind of have a quick look at the staged approach, and then we'll wrap up with a high-level review. We're going to do a bit of a tag team, so all three of us will talk, including Campbell online. So we'll get started. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'll see it taken as read. But the Act associated with the preliminary arrangements for local water done well got put in place in March. There is a further bill that is going to come in December. So, and that further bill, as I kind of call it, Bill 3, will look at give you more clarity around those financing tools and some of the new structural arrangements that are available for councils to consider. And it will also pick up on some other regulation around stormwater. I picked up on stormwater in the slide deck so that we can have a chat about that. But it will also kind of look at how that interfaces with the planning regime moving forward. So there will be some additional rules and instruments to consider that are going to come out in Bill 3. So that local water done well, the requirement is on the water service delivery plans. They are due in the 3rd of September 2025. Notwithstanding, next year is a local election year, and thereby you will need to have this water service delivery plan adopted by council prior to that election period. So you're sitting around the July, August. The Water Service Delivery Plan requires you to pass a resolution associated with it. So it does have to come to this table. It does have to have a resolution associated with it. And at the same time, the CE has to certify that it is true and correct. So they're kind of the legal hooks that you need to be aware of and associated with this plan. And the plan is really testing the financial sustainability. And so that financial sustainability test, which we'll talk about, we've already ran some of your numbers in the LTP, but that financial sustainability test is considering that you have enough revenue to undertake your delivery of your water services. It's going to check in on your planned capital investment. So therefore your capital works and your operating costs through your 10-year plan and potentially to the horizon of 30 years if you choose to look that way. Being a growth council, that should be something that you should consider. And then it's also going to look at the financing aspect. So can you actually finance these works and have a longevity aspect around that? So kind of think about how you run your council books and your credit ratings. Those aspects will come into it. It does ask questions around affordability, not so much that it's expecting you to drive an affordability, but it does ask questions around how this is going to be managed from your rates and how you're going to pick this up and how you're going to communicate that with your community. So you do need to understand what arrangement moves forward and what questions does that have on your community, and particularly in affordability. And the other area that we're looking at, it's not a requirement of the Water Service Delivery Plan, but it's actually your resource capacity. So it's all well and good to put a plan together, but if you can't deliver it and have the staff to do that, then actually there's no point putting it forward. So we do suggest that you check in regard to your resource capacity for that. Now, I'm going to go. Oh, here we go. We put in an additional slide in regard to the urban stormwater arrangements because I think this is important for you to take into consideration. So the local water done well, the water requires you to look across 3 waters. So that's your water supply, your wastewater, and your stormwater. Stormwater is optional in regard to whether it transfers into the new arrangement, whatever you choose to decide. So the water and wastewater is a must, and stormwater, you've got options in regard to whether you for it to choose to stay with the council family or whether you would choose to bring it into a different arrangement. And that has options associated with that. So even if you chose for it to stay within the council family, you could still have a contracting arrangement back to the water service provider to actually manage your pipes and your manholes and your drainage. So there's options associated with it. So it's not a given the way the water supply and the wastewater is. So that's something that you will need to figure out as you kind of go through the development of the Water Service Delivery Plan and see what's the right fit for you and your community. The other bit in regard to stormwater, this will all be clarified in Bill 3. So it's still going through. So we're anticipating this, I suppose, is that stormwater is likely to remain a rate. So as opposed to a fee, aka a utility charge. So water supply and wastewater have options around being a utility charge and or a rate if you choose to do that. But stormwater, because of that public benefit aspect, is the signals from central government is that will remain a rate. So again, that would be something to consider as you go through. The other aspect about stormwater that we're expecting to come out in Bill 3 in December, and this is, I would say, it's been a transfer from the previous legislation that was repealed. They want to give some clarity and certainty, particularly over urban overland flow paths that go through private properties and urban water courses. And so they do want, in that Bill 3, it is going to be looking to define the roles and responsibilities of that. So making complete clarity on who is responsible for what, being private versus public. And then there's going to be some tools or planning instruments to how you would manage the responsibilities associated with that. So in the previous legislation, they put council responsible for monitoring and assessing all overland flow paths and all urban water courses. And so that is quite different to how you currently arrange and manage your stormwater. You do not look and it's not on your books to look at private overland flow paths. But heads up, that is likely to come through in regard to Bill 3. So not necessarily you doing the work, but that oversight and monitoring and managing the hazards for that. And look, and that was one of the big drives from the Auckland floods. And that's why that got actually put into the previous legislation in the bill to kind of manage all those private overland flow paths. So we're waiting in December to get more clarity on that. So what you do now in stormwater, I would say, will be increasing in regard to responsibilities and management of moving forward. So consultation is a hot topic. So through the new legislation, they have streamlined the consultation requirements. So you do not need to consult on the Water Service Delivery Plan via your Local Government Act and your Significant Engagement Policy, which you would normally do as part of your LTP and annual plan. They've done that specifically to streamline it. So the mandatory consultation on these water service delivery plans are for 2 options only. And they are on your existing models, your current arrangements versus a preferred model. And whatever preferred model you decide is appropriate for Tasman, District Council and the community, that's what you consult on. Unlike the Local Government Act and the Significant Engagement Policy, when you are assessing options and communicating options to your community, you have to do the analysis and all the options and how all those options differ between each other and how it all differs back to what you're currently doing. That is not a requirement of that. So this does very much streamline the consultation. And so the consultation timelines, if you have to get this water service delivery plan adopted and signed off by July, August 2025, you will need to be consulting Q1 2025. So around about February, March, you need to be out doing your consultation on your preferred model so that you're able to feed that back into the plan and take regard of it and then sign that off. Also different to the Local Government Act, you do not have to go through a hearing and submission process that you would normally have done as part of your annual plan and LTP. How you derive and how you choose to seek that feedback, that is purely a council decision. And how you decide to treat that feedback and incorporate that feedback or not is purely over to you. So there's nothing in the legislation that prescribes how you choose to do that. That is a decision for yourselves. I just wanted to pick on the status quo. So whilst you have to consult on your preferred model versus your existing, I think it's worthwhile to highlight that your existing delivery of your water services will be no longer. The reason why I'm saying that is no longer is that you will have the regulators coming in. So at the moment, your unitary authority, so there is an aspect in regard to the primary regulator is the regional councils in regard to your consenting. Te Meta ROI, or the new name, which is the Water Services Authority, is the primary regulator for drinking water supply, and they also have an oversight role associated with wastewater and stormwater. That oversight role has been strengthened through this legislation and is likely to be strengthened further via Bill 3. At the moment, they are preparing wastewater standards, and those wastewater standards will be for treatment discharges from your treatment plants, and they'll be out for consultation in 2025. And on top of that, your third regulator that will be coming into play will be your economic regulator, the Commerce Commission. And the Commerce Commission will be dropping down, looking at your asset management, your charging, your tariff setting, and then they also have an element in regard to that consumer protection. Now, how that's going, that legislation is still being worked through. The previous legislation associated that was repealed, and so we will be looking into additional legislation to kind of set up the Commerce Commission. It's going to be tied into Bill 3. And so you will have the ability to submit on that through that process. So, so as I say, your world as you know it in regard to Three Waters is going to change. You will have a regulator who will be looking at that. Information disclosure will be a minimum requirement. They're not in a position to do the price quality path, which is what they do to the energy sector, really kind of challenging that asset management versus the tariffs versus the pricing. But some of the larger organizations will be subject to that. So, and the other aspect is that you will have to ring fence. So even if you decided to keep the water services within the council family, you basically are running two accounts. You're running two balance sheets, so they do have to be completely ring fenced, and then reported on to the regulators in regard to that remit. So any revenue that you take for water needs to be spent in regard to the waters. You can't use it to assist other activities within the council family. So a different process to how it's currently operating, and that will kind of come through in regard to Bill 3. It will go through a selectivity process, so you will have the ability to submit on it, and the intention is that Bill 3 will come into legislation mid-2025. So I'm going, so in regard to the plans that you'll be signing off in July from August, you have to outline the proposed model arrangements that you're likely to move forward with it. That can be by yourselves, or it could be a joint arrangement with neighbouring councils. You do have to explain where you get the revenue from and how you're going to use that to deliver the water services. And again, that will be separated from your other functions and activities. You have to explain how the council will ensure that the delivery of water services will be financially sustainable by 30th June 2028. That is what that needs to go into the plan. Now, the financial sustainability is not just about your revenue and your financing aspect, it also takes into account your compliance. So it is signaling that you, in this plan, you have to show how you're going to be fully compliant with the regulations by the 30th of June 2028. And that will differ potentially from your LTP, but this plan is asking you that question and asking you to demonstrate how you would get to compliance by the 3rd of June 2028. It does ask for a summary of the consultation. So we've just talked about that consultation that needs to happen in Q1, beginning of Q2, 25. You have to document how that went in the plan. The other aspect is you have a requirement of an implementation plan, which forms part of this water service delivery plan. Now, that implementation plan will then be monitored by central government moving forward. So the water service delivery plan is a one-off. This will be the only time that you do it. It will be giving an understanding to the DIA and the Commerce Commission, who will also review it. It will be basically setting your base case. Your implementation plan on how you're going to achieve financial sustainability by the 30th of June 2020 will then be monitored afterwards. So you will be held to account in regard to that implementation plan. And then, as I say, the Act is not prescriptive, nor is the water service delivery plan. To be fair, it really is over to you via this water service delivery plan and the implementation plan to decide for you and your community what is the best future service delivery arrangements that suit you. I've just given a high level of the stages. So look, stage 1 is something that we've put forward. So for each council, you really need to understand your own strategic alignment, strategic intent, and basically a method to ensure that your strategic objectives are going to flow through this water service delivery plan and basically wrap back into your own strategic plans and policies associated with it. Stage 2 through to stage 5 is actually the water service delivery plan in itself. And so stage 2 of the plan looks at your current service provisions and your current state assessment. So it is pulling out your asset data, your compliance data. It pulls out who do you serve, which communities do you supply services to, but also which communities you do not supply services too as well. It asks that question. Stage 3 is really the financial sustainability. So 3 and 4 pulls together all the kind of financing, modeling and analysis and testing, looking at your capital delivery program, your investment plan, your compliance regime, and looking at your revenue and your finances. And that modeling then basically has to do a test back to the legislation to say, are you meeting the requirements associated with the Act? So a bulk of the work is sitting in 3 and 4. And that will also tease out your preferred model moving forward as well. So that is kind of the wrap up of that work. Stage 5 is the implementation plan, which we just talked about, which will have ongoing monitoring process around it. And then stage 6 is we have put in as additional to the requirement, and that's just the roadmap and your internal council processes that you have to go. What is not required and what is not documented or asked for through the water service delivery plan is what happens to the rest of council. That is not a requirement, and they haven't asked it, and they don't really need to know it. But you around this table need to know what happens in regard to the balance of council, so you can make an informed decision. So that stage 6 is basically documenting the council processes and a roadmap to kind of get you from now to July or August to sign it off, as well as thinking what happens with the balance of council. But as I say, the Department of Internal Affairs won't be asking you that question. So I'm going to move it on to Nick, and he's going to pick up on the minimum requirements, and then we'll go to Campbell for some of the finances, and then I'll do a bit of a wrap up at the end.
Thanks, Lorraine, and good morning, everyone. So this next block of slides, we're going to be taking you through the models that are available for future service delivery arrangements for water services. So starting with the minimum requirements. So Lorraine's talked about future legislation setting up the institutional framework for water services delivery, and we're expecting that bill, it's the local government water services bill, to be introduced later this month, and the government's indicated that it will enact that legislation before the end of June 2025. So that's coming through pretty shortly, and you'll see in that legislation a number of provisions that are across the board requirements that apply to all modes of service delivery, whether that's in-house council business units or new CCOs. So just quickly run through those. So at the top, I think Lorraine's already explained that there will be essentially 3 separate interrelated regulatory frameworks: environmental regulation through the regional council sort of unitary functions, drinking water quality regulation by Taumata Arawai, and Commerce Commission as a new regulator. And so the new economic regulatory framework that will apply to water services will be provided for within that legislation that will be introduced in the next few weeks. The Commerce Commission has got a number of roles under that legislation. It's responsible for monitoring and enforcing the ring fencing requirements. So that's really looking at water services from a financial perspective and ensuring that the revenue that is collected for water services is spent on water services, and that there is some policing of the boundary, if you like, in terms of any sort of cost allocation that might be made or share costs that are attributed to water services activities if they continue to be operated within the council, so that there's a fair apportionment of costs going towards those activities and that there's no cross subsidisation. So that's one of their roles. The other role that they have is to regulate through information disclosure or through price quality regulation. And as Lorraine said, that's really looking at the costs, ensuring that they're value for money, ensuring that the revenue is sufficient to maintain assets and provide services, and that the investment is adequate. So that is a level of external sort of scrutiny by a regulator that is really very new for New Zealand, but is pretty common in overseas jurisdictions. The next item there is that there will be a new planning and accountability framework for water services. This is quite a significant change and perhaps not fully appreciated across the country. Essentially, water services will be coming out of the long-term planning framework. There will be a new bespoke framework for planning and reporting in the form of a water services strategy. So each council or each CCO will be asked to prepare a water services strategy which sets out its objectives, sets out its proposed asset management plan and investment, sets out its proposed financial projections, how it's going to charge customers for those services, and also the performance framework that it intends to report against. So those are the sorts of things you'll currently see in your statement of service performance expectations around the water activities. There will be an expectation that those are set for water services through that water services strategy. So that strategy forms the role, if you like, that the LTP is currently playing in relation to water services. And then related to that, there will be separate accounting requirements. So for water services, councils will need to produce a separate set of financial statements, including balance sheets and cash flow statements, and they will be subject to separate audit as well. The next step there we've touched on already, that's the financial sustainability requirement. So there will be a legislative requirement around that, and that is obviously a key test for acceptance of the water services delivery plans as well. And we'll touch more on that in more detail shortly. There will be statutory objectives in the legislation for water services. So we are anticipating that they will be things like operating water services infrastructure and delivering water services, protecting public health and the environment, operating in accordance with good commercial practices, and acting in the interests of present and future customers, and also delivering water services in a financially sustainable and resilient manner. And these statutory objectives are relevant because, in particular, if there's a new CCO service delivery model being set up, that new CCO will be constrained by those statutory objectives. So it will be required to work towards achieving them, but it will also be limited from doing anything else. So you can't have a water CCO, for example, setting up a business that's unrelated to water services as part of it. And then finally, there will be provisions within the legislation, restrictions against privatisation. There will be prohibitions, as there are now in the Local Government Act, on the loss of control, sale or disposal of infrastructure or significant infrastructure, and also restrictions on the use of water services so that they can't be used for security, so that they can't be put at risk to lenders. So turning now to the service delivery models that are available. So I guess the key point here is that none of these models are the status quo. Each of them, including in the column on the left-hand side, the internal business unit or division, is quite different in terms of the operating environment that it operates in compared to what we have now. But that remains an option for councils, and there will be a number of councils that elect to continue with internal service delivery through a business unit or division, albeit subject to those new requirements in terms of strategy and planning and financial accountability. As we move along there, the next option is a single council water organisation. So this would be 100% owned CCO. It's not the same as setting up a CCO under the current Local Government Act arrangements. So there will be a specific class of water services organisations that will be subject to those statutory objectives and with particular requirements, including in relation to those planning and accountability changes. But there are many similarities to how you would currently think about existing 100% owned CCOs There will be a little bit of detail in the legislation just to look at there in terms of what those differences are. As you move along, the future legislation will include provision for the establishment of multi-council water organisations. There will be some specific provisions around these. So, for example, there is the provision for councils to issue a statement of service, statement of expectations, which the water organisation would be required to comply with. It's intended that there be just one of those for a multi-council water services organisation, and that is to avoid different shareholding councils pulling the entity in sort of different directions. So that has implications for how councillors that choose to form such an entity work together to agree on what those shared expectations should look like. And there are a number of mechanisms that we expect to be put in place for councils that choose to kind of go down that path, which we can talk about in more detail in terms of ensuring that councils are able to hold those entities to account. The fourth and the fifth options there are a little bit different. They involve the establishment of a consumer trust to own the assets. This model is more independent than from councils than the other model. It's designed essentially as an option that achieves a greater level of financial independence. So each of those three service delivery model arrangements on the left-hand side of that diagram are linked in some way financially to council, and we can explain what the implications of those are. Whereas when you get into the fourth and fifth options, they are completely independent of councils. The downside of that is that that takes off the table the ability, at the moment at least, for those types of entities to borrow from the LGFA. So they have to stand on their own 2 feet and would be subject to borrowing from banks or capital markets probably at higher rates. And in some cases, there may be questions about whether they can actually get access to finance. But that's a high level overview of those options. Just drop down into some of the kind of key differences. So I'll go through this pretty quickly, but also happy to take questions on this. So each of the options kind of differs along each of those dimensions on the left-hand side. So ownership, governance, accountability, borrowing, strategy and planning, and there are some other differences. So in the first 2 columns with the internal business unit, that's essentially part of council. Oversight and governance as it would be today. So elected member oversight either through whole of council and or committee structures. There would nevertheless be changes in relation to accountability. As we talked about, there will be separate water services strategy requirements and separate reporting as either as part of your annual report and separate audit. Borrowing would be as it is now in terms of the current arrangements, but that option is probably it's the least change option, has the advantage of maintaining integration with other council functions. In terms of a single council CCO option, the main difference there is that you would have a separate board, and there's requirements in the legislation for board members to be professionally competent board members. So will be a prohibition on the appointment of elected members to those boards as well, just to keep that independence. So that's something to sort of look at there, but similar to other CCO structures. Other than that, obviously the boards will be responsible for developing the water services strategy rather than council, but boards will be obliged to act in accordance with any statement of expectations that the council issues, provided that statement of expectations is consistent with the requirements of the legislation. The LGFA has said that structure can borrow directly from the LGFA, or it can borrow via council. If it borrows directly, it has potential to increase borrowing to up to 500% of revenue, recognising that water services are a very infrastructure and asset intensive business. So it makes sense to spread the costs of that infrastructure over the life of that assets, and that would require a water organisation to operate with a higher level of gearing than other council activities. Those are the kind of the key differences there. As you move across into the multi-council space, obviously there you're into some additional challenges around the achievement of coordination between shareholders. So we would expect those structures to have things like shareholders councils or shareholders forums as a means for the different council shareholders to agree on how they would appoint board members, agree on statements of expectations, and form a joint basis for reporting and holding the entity to account. So there are some particular considerations to think about how best to set those up if you are looking at those at that model. In terms of the borrowing, again, that's similar to the single council LGFA arrangements through the LGFA, and both that is, provided that councils provide some form of guarantee or support to the entity, and that's sort of what I meant earlier when I said those that class of entity are still financially linked to council, so they're only able to borrow from the LGFA with the provision of that guaranteed support, and that may also have some implications for council's credit rating as well. And then you're into the trust models, and I won't differentiate between those, but effectively you will see this model in use in the electricity distribution sector, for example. So where consumer trusts have been established to own the organisations, and in those cases, that's subject to the trustees, subject to elections at large, and then the trustees effectively perform the functions that council is currently performing. And then option 4 is sort of more of a mixed ownership model. So in terms of process, I'll rattle through the next few slides because Lorraine has covered a number of these elements. But when it comes to the water services delivery plan and making decisions on that, the council is required to identify and assess the existing approach and to reach a proposal around the future service delivery arrangements. All of the options that are looked at as part of the plan will need to satisfy those minimum requirements and the financial sustainability requirements, which means that those plans and the financial projections that they contain may be different from the LTP. There is an expectation that the water services delivery plans will make a comparison of the different models and assess their advantages and disadvantages, and that's a minimum requirement as well for the information that must be required for consultation purposes. So this, for most councils, we think the choice is going to boil down to one of these 3 models. So these are the same as the models in the first 3 columns of the previous slides. We're not expecting that for most councils that the consumer trust ownership model will be viable, and that's largely because of those access to finance constraints. But that could be looked at further as part of the future work. And then this decision-making process. And so this is the process, I guess, that needs to be satisfied to meet the requirements of the legislation. I think the key point on this slide is that when it comes to community consultation, each of the options to be consulted on needs to be described in sufficient detail to enable that assessment of the advantages and disadvantages, and to enable communities to understand those options. So that means fleshing out the options in terms of ownership and governance, the operating model, revenues, what that means for affordability, all of those things. And then councils may also wish to consider how that relates to control and influence, and how the model interacts with other council functions. And so all of this leads to a proposed stage approach. So And today really is the beginning of that approach. So firstly, understanding your existing service delivery model and whether it is viable and sustainable to continue on. Because if it's not, then you really need to be investing in understanding the next best alternative. If it is, then you've got choices. We're proposing an approach whereby you go through a long listing process. So you look at the range of options and do a high level of assessment of those with a view to identifying the next best alternative. But we don't think that needs to be a huge exercise. And then we would advise completing further detailed assessment on at least 2 models. And that's really to ensure that the council's in a position to be able to consult on at least 2 options, which is a minimum requirement of the legislation. Conduct that consultation, get feedback, and then make decisions. And then once you've got a preferred model in place, then you can develop the implementation plan, which is also a requirement to be submitted as part of the Water Services Delivery Plan. I think we've covered financial sustainability.
So we're just kind of going to have a quick look in regard to the information that's contained in your LTP. And so we have did a little bit of a deep dive with the staff, your staff officers, and we've kind of looked at your assets and we've looked at your finances. And so I'm just going to take you through that, and Cam is going to help me as well. I'm not going to spend any time on the assets. You can read this at your leisure. But this gives you a bit of an overview in regard to the current state of your assets, the service that you provide, where you're sitting in regard to the levels of services. You put this in your annual report anyway, so this committee will be used to understanding that. And we've just outlined some of the challenges that you have and your current compliance status. In regard to the capital expenditure, we have spent some time with the team looking at the LTP and assessing the investment plan over the next 10 years. As I say, we have picked up some of the numbers associated with the next 30 years, but for this overview, we've just focused on the 10 years. And as you can see, as you move out, there's starting to be quite a bit of investment with water treatment plant and upgrades. We also looked at the investment excluding the 3 waters. So this is trying to get an understanding of the balance of council. And again, so just an area that we kind of have highlighted is that as you go towards the back end of the 10-year plan, the work program associated with everything that's not 3 waters is kind of dropping off. So that would just be something for you to kind of look at as you kind of move forward, and look, not unusual in regard to LTP planning. Key areas just to pick up in regard to the capital expenditure. I'm going to caveat this with the financial sustainability requirement of June 2028 in regard to compliance. So there is budget included in the 10-year plan to increase your compliance across the schemes, and particularly in regard to water supply. And there's an additional 12.7 million from 2028 onwards to ensure that the compliance continues to be achieved. The challenge that you have in the next 10 years is consents. So you've got 15 consents that are up for renewal. So 12 of them in water and 3 of them in wastewater. And they're all due to expire in the next 10 years. And so that is, well, to date, renewing consents is a costly and timely exercise. And that's even before you put a spade in the ground and actually start doing the compliance works or the upgrade works or the growth works associated with that. So look, that's just something to highlight. And at the same time, we have TMID ROI renewing and reviewing all of those standards underway. So actually you will be renewing these consents as we're trying to understand the regulatory planning framework as well. So as I say, look, we have done this initial review in regard to the 10-year plan. There would be a little bit of work that would be required to kind of tick that box in regard to the investment sufficiency. So you will need to work that through in regard to the water service delivery plan to ensure that you would meet that test under the Act. I'm going to ask Campbell. Campbell, do you want to take them through the revenue and the financing sufficiency?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Lorraine. So as Lorraine mentioned, these next few slides essentially just present back what you have in your long-term plan, but under that lens that's of financial sustainability and the water service delivery plan. So it sort of cuts it in a way that you may not have thought about some of these activities previously. So as I say, this is just presenting back the LTP. We haven't made any changes to the level of expenditure or revenue in the LTP. Overall, though, you'll see as we work through, the Three Waters is in a overall good position with sufficient revenue and borrowing capacity based on the current projections that are in there. But there's just a question around affordability, which I'll come to towards the end. On this first slide, we're looking at revenue sufficiency, which is a question of whether there's sufficient revenue to cover the costs for water services delivery. And so that's looking at your operating revenue, which is predominantly from your tariff, your water tariffs or targeted rates, and comparing that to your operating expenditure, interest and depreciation. And you can see on the left-hand side there that over the forecast period of the LTP, it's running at a small surplus. This is essentially a reflection of the revenue profile of all the increases in prices that are reflected in the LTP, which is supporting that. On the right-hand side, you'll see the council excluding Three Waters. So as mentioned earlier, that's not a requirement of your water service delivery plans, but it's obviously a key consideration for the council. And it does show a net deficit here for the residual council, but the thing to be aware of that is that that's around particularly driven by how transport is funded, with it being partially funded through Waka Kotahi, which means that you don't need to recover all of your depreciation through your tariff revenues. If we could move on to the next slide, please.
Right? No, it's not. I know. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. So the next page here is looking at financing sufficiency. So this is a question of whether council has sufficient borrowing or access to borrowing to finance activities and within limits. On the left-hand side, all we've used here is the net debt to revenue ratio, which you'll be familiar with as the ratio that's applied by S&P when they come to do your external rating, but also LGFA, and is also the basis for your internal council limit. At the Three Water activity level, you can see on the left-hand side there that there's a bit of variation across the individual water activities, and over time they move as levels of investment and the repayment of those borrowings change. With, you can see, for example, wastewater has that uptick towards the end with that increased investment in treatment plants. But overall, the Three Waters tends to sit relatively stable, which is that solid line at around the 350% over the forecast period, with just a slight uptick towards the end. Over on the other side, you can see council excluding or including and excluding the Three Waters. So Three Waters is highly leveraged relative to the rest of your business or your other activities. And this is a very common picture that councils across the country have, where water activities are more highly leveraged than other activities. Together, though, the council has to manage its overall position, and so it's coming in under your council limit there. So that green line is coming under the 160% internal limit that you have, and you're well under the LGFA threshold of the 280%. So then turning to debt headroom, which is the sort of follow on from that, where you sit relative to those thresholds. And you can see here with Three Waters coming in under the 500% limit, there is headroom across every year within the LTP forecast. That 500% limit, that's much higher than the one you may be familiar with, around to the 280% that was on the previous slide, and is the one that's previously been articulated by LGFA. Recently, they've come out and indicated that they would be willing to lend to water organisations up to 500% debt to revenue, assuming that those entities also meet other prudent credit metrics as well. So that means that Three Waters as a standalone basis would be able to access borrowing and has some headroom there. And then following on from the previous slide again, which had that really low level of residual council borrowings, you have quite significant headroom, both when you exclude Three Waters, both up to the council limit, so that's that orange section, and then on top of that up to the LGFA limit. So there'd be a comfortable headroom there, which would potentially give you the ability to look at how you spread the recovery of those borrowings across time for residual activities, if you weren't constrained by the high leverage that was in Three Waters. This slide here is continuing on the financing sufficiency lens, but when we think about water utilities on a standalone basis, they are assessed by rating agencies and financiers on a different basis to how they look at local governments. So as the previous couple of slides talked to, we looked at the debt to revenue ratio, which is used by rating agencies, it's used by LGFA, it's used by councils across the country. But when we look at water utilities, rating agencies look at a ratio called the FFO to debt, which I'll come to, which is a slightly different way of a different metric. And they also look at different bands of how that is measured against in terms of assessing whether it is highly leveraged or where it sits within the scale, and then what it means in terms of a rating outcome. I probably don't want to get into too much detail around these ratios, but I guess what we wanted to flag though is that there is this alternative way of measuring financing or the headroom for a standalone water utility that's looking to access capital markets in its own right. And this may also be, once LGFA start to look into how they assess water entities on a standalone basis, they may look to more water relevant entity metrics as well. So there's one last point on that slide is that looking at those ratios though for Tasman, they're particularly when we're including development contributions in the metric, the coming into that significant band, which is highlighted on the left there, is supportive of would mean that you're able to access markets essentially. So it's a good position to be in. So then coming to affordability. So as we've talked to on the previous slides, there's the headroom there available, revenue sufficient to cover the costs that have been presented in the long-term plan. But that is underpinned by some relatively material increases in revenue path. And what that means in terms of the average connection charge is an increase from around the 2,500 up to the kind of 4,500 per connection level. And this is at an aggregated level, so it's all of your general and targeted rates compared to all of your connections. So there's obviously going to be a bit more detail to work through as you look down at the different customer types that you have. But at that higher level, that's the rough picture that we see. And then how that compares to generally used affordability benchmarks, it does start to push well above that 2.5% threshold. So this will be an area that we look to potentially go into a bit more detail in the next phase of work, just to be able to work through that picture in a bit more detail, because it might tease out where some of those differences are coming from and will help provide a more clear picture. Lorraine, did you want to talk to this next slide?
Yep.
So in regard to the key takeaways, so like over the next 10 years, you are planning to spend 225 million on renewals, which is around about 106% of the projected depreciation expense. So look, I mean, that is just something to consider as you move forward. So you are going in that you're covering all your aspects in regard to that. I think the key thing just to kind of keep in mind of is really kind of your growth and how that's going to kind of pick up as you kind of go through. And then just checking your probably capacity to deliver, particularly as you kind of march through the LTP. You are ramping up and you've got some significant projects with your wastewater and water supply upgrades as well as your consenting. So just to be mindful of the actual practicalities to deliver that. As Campbell said, the revenue sufficiency is on track. So no major red flags that have been highlighted in regard to your current LTP. And so that forecasting is aligned with the expected future requirement for revenue sufficiency over that period, and it looks to be adequate to recover the cost of the water services. Campbell also picked up in regard to your financing sufficiency, and we talked about that on a standalone basis. Whilst you are higher than your council 280 council limit, you are below the 500. I think it's important to call out that that standalone basis is on the basis of a CCO. If you remain with an in-house business unit, your borrowing limit sits at the 280. And so that higher limit only gets set up if you move towards a CCO type arrangement. So just something to pick up on there. And in regard to the affordability, towards the back end of that LTP, you start to go above that international benchmark of 2.5 household income. So that will just be something to monitor as you go through. And again, that's probably picking up the increase of your capital program as you kind of move towards that back end of the LTP. And just a note, we want to use the figures in your LTP. Your LTP does not include any costs associated with setting up any of these alternative arrangements. So they would be over and above that. Just quickly to finalize, you can have a read of this, but these are just the key dates and we have highlighted them as we go through. So the work has started to commence, particularly around the analysis of your financial analysis of the LTP. You've seen a summary of that today, but I can guarantee you with the work that the team's been doing with the Matt's team, there's been a lot of work to get to those graphs, even though they kind of look nice and simple. There's been quite a lot of analysis in the background associated with it. You need to start thinking about preparing your communication and engagement strategy plan so that you are ready to go out in Q1, start of Q2 in 2025. To enable you to go out and consult, you need to have a good handle on your preferred model, and ultimately you will need to see that in probably a full council meeting in February, March next year. We've talked about when you need to engage your community, and as I said, you will need to adopt that plan July, August 2025, and you only will need to sign that off in regard to our capacity of CE. Associated with that, the plans need to be submitted by the 3rd of September 2025. That's the legislative time frame. And they go to the Department of Internal Affairs. They will assess it and they will accept the plan is the wording in the legislation. So they don't approve the plan, they accept the plan. And what they're doing is that they're reviewing the plan in regard, is it compliant with the Act? So that's the test that they undertake. And that acceptance is done by the Secretary of Local Government. At the same time as you submit the plan, the Department of Internal Affairs will share that plan with the Commerce Commission, and they will also be reviewing that. And then once your plan is accepted, it is anticipated that council will be public and will be published on the council website. And so thereby you are probably going towards the end of 2025 to do that. At that point, it is live, it is public, and then you will be kicking into your implementation plan, which forms part of your water service delivery plan. And then there will be an ongoing monitoring of the council in relation to compliance with that plan. And that's a wrap. So that's a lot of information we've given you today, but hopefully it gives you a bit of an insight of what is required and currently where you're sitting in relation to your current LTP.
All right, well, thank you very much, Lorraine, Nick and Campbell. I mean, it is a huge amount of information, but well worked through. What we're going to do now is I'm just going to get Richard to make a brief comment about what is going to be the next step in terms of around this table. Then if we can go and get a cup of tea and then bring it back. And then we have got an indication of questions from councillors Killenmont, Mailing and Maru. And then we will see if we can wrap it up after that. So, so Richard, over to you, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the 28th of November, we're going to be bringing a report to you. It'll be a decision report, largely around focusing and narrowing down on those 5 models that were presented. I think my general feeling around the table is that the last 2 models you're probably not going to go for, but certainly the first 3 you would want to consider. So that decision report on the 28th of November will be a report that basically asks you to make a decision about that model so that we can do those up. Preferably, if we get down to 2, that'd be really good. Can I say in terms of model 3 with the other councils, we are having discussions at officer level with both Marlborough and Buller. If they do come on board, we may struggle to hit the timeline of the 3rd of September. And in that case, we'll probably have the opportunity to go to the minister and ask for an extension of time. So that option 3, I think at this stage, we'll probably still leave on the table, but certainly we'll put effort into options 1 and 2. And that'll be a decision that you'll make in November that helps us focus on what we need to do. So that gives you an indication of where we're heading with this at this stage over the next month or so. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Richard. So, so let's get a cup of tea and then bring it back, and we'll just go to a few questions. Thank you.
I'm going to go to the project because there'll be people over there waiting for us. Yeah, I'll just start with the
Chair, how long is the break?
Well done.
All right, thanks. Sorry, it was actually long. How long is a lot to get through?
How long is the break? When are we returning? Hello, Councillor Mackenzie.
Sorry, Councillor Greening, you had a question?
What time are we returning? I didn't hear that.
Oh, as soon as people have made a cup of tea.
So what time will that be? 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Thank you.
We do have a number of matters on our agenda this morning, which might mean that we're pushed for time. I'm just wanting to give everybody a heads up that if we don't get through our agenda items from the Operations Committee agenda this morning, then by the time we get to about 12:15, we will adjourn the meeting. And then we will come back to the meeting this afternoon after the full council meeting. So that will be our plan if we don't get through our agenda. But anyway, hopefully you all asked your questions in the morning tea break, but if not, we will start off with Councillor Kinnermonth.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. In the interest of time, I will not make a question now.
Oh, twice in one day. Pardon?
Ask your question.
All right, so I've kind of given a heads up that we may adjourn and recommence the meeting this afternoon. So if you wish to ask a question, then please ask a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've already been allocated another job this afternoon. I won't be making that. But now, if I can ask a question, the drinking water standards are currently come through from the Drinking Water Act, Ministry of Health, through to Kumana Atawai. So what changes now was under the new local water done well?
So Te Mata Arawai, or the Water Services Authority, will still be the primary regulator for the drinking water supply. What they are looking at, and what may be picked up through legislation moving through, is the standards associated with the rural water supplies. So they are looking at that at the moment, so that it's been addressed. And the other thing that they're looking at, which will come out for consultation in early 2025, is the wastewater standards. So picking up the design standards, the treatment standards when you come out of a treatment plant. So they're the two areas that are being looked at. In regard to the drinking water supply itself, for urban supplies and municipal supplies, but you just have to comply with the standards that are already in place.
Councillor Mayling.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. We currently have a joint organisation, which is a council committee, not a CCO, for wastewater with a neighbouring council that does not want to do water jointly with us. So how are we going to fit that in the future? Because it's a separate and it's a $350 million plant to replace. So when I looked at the models, you know, you could do the first model, council only, but that would only be for part of our water, wastewater, not drinking water and stormwater. So are you able to do that or not? And do we want to keep working with them anyway?
Richard, do you want to have a go at talking about that first?
That is something that we have to would have to work through when whatever option we choose. One of the ones we can actually do is that because the treatment plant is in our jurisdiction, we might push for the fact that we look after it and we charge another council for discharging into our wastewater treatment plant. So I mean that's one option. The other one is that they continue to operate and run it and charge us like they do now. So yeah, but yeah, you're right. The ideal situation would be to have them in the tent, as it were.
Thank you, Councillor Maru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm interested in the option 4 and 5 of the approaches. Does the trust have to be new, or can that be an existing utility trust if they were interested in being one of those partners, or does it have to be a trust set up from scratch?
Look, this is one of the part of the proposals that is probably not as fleshed out and understood as some of the others, but our current understanding is that because of there are those statutory objectives that relate only to water services, that would rule out an existing electricity distribution business trust to begin with. But you might have noticed that in terms of those minimum requirements that were listed on that slide, there was a little asterisk at the bottom which said that there is potential to request exemptions from some of those requirements from the minister. So that would require a separate ministerial central government decision-making process. But we are aware that there's at least one other council around the country that is looking at that option of whether their local electricity lines business could take on water services as well. It would still have to be completely ring-fenced from the electricity distribution networks and subject to those separate ring-fencing requirements. But potentially it could be done. It would involve a lot of change to those trust structures, and that's not a straightforward thing to do.
And then just the final one, Richard sort of mentioned the consequence of not meeting the deadline is a request of the department or the minister. But what's the consequence of not meeting the September deadline? Because I take it the pressure for us local government elections the year after will be government elections.
So in regard to the consequence, we do not know. Nobody's tested it yet. But in picking up in the joint plan, so you can seek an extension if that joint plan was going to be something that you wanted to do. That extension request has to be in with the DAA and is subject to minister's approval by July next year. But you would need to have something, you would need to justify that. You would need to have some substance, and the councillors, would have all had to agree to that. So you just kind of can't rock up and say, we're still talking to each other. Can you please extend it? So it's not that easy.
Just one other thing to add on that, the Local Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act, the Act, which is a mouthful, does include ministerial step-in rights. So there is the potential to appoint things like Crown observers or Crown facilitators, which have increasing decision-making powers. So if you don't comply, there is that, I guess, that risk that central government might step in.
And that Crown Water Service specialist can write the plan for you. And furthermore, if that step-in is required from the government, you will pick up the fees associated with that.
Oh, no such thing as a free lunch. Thank you. Just a question from me. So bill number 3, I think you said that it looks like it could be passed around mid-2025. And so that's when we will have absolute certainty, I guess, about the legislation in its final form. But we're having to go out and consult and make decisions before the legislation has passed. So do you see any risks in that approach?
Well, you will get an insight of it. So the bill 3 will be disclosed in a couple of weeks. So say December. It's still subject to a select committee and submission process, but you will have a good understanding of what is proposed in it. Notwithstanding, it could be subject to changes through the select committee process and then signed up. So you will have a good understanding of the travel of direction and how that potentially could impact you.
All right, thank you. All right, well, it looks as though we have no further questions. So once again, really appreciate it. There's a huge amount of information and it's good to get visibility into it. So really appreciate you taking the time. I think Campbell, thank you, and Nick and Lorraine, much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, councillors, we're just going to change the order. You nearly
said that.
You nearly sat on the hot seat. Sorry. So we're going to move to the paper 7.3, which is the Richmond South Water Reservoir Notice of Requirement. So sorry about that. Right now, councillors, if we could just get back. This is excellent. All right. This is on page 55 of your papers. Just noting that there has been a change to the resolution here to, instead of confirming something, we've got approves and agrees. But thank you, Blair. Over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, councillors. I wasn't aware of that late change, but I actually would recommend that it goes back to what it was. Or if you do need to have an approve in there, you approve our recommendation and confirm. The reason for that is that the Act is very specific about the decision that needs to be made, and the wording is confirm.
All right, I appreciate that. So so just to clarify, confirming is just confirming a conclusion that has been reached.
So the confirming will be confirming the recommendation that our staff have made to confirm the notice for requirement, which would bring a new designation into the Tasman Resource Management Plan and enable the construction of the water reservoir at 520 Hill Road South.
All right, well, thank you for that. Apologies for that confusion. I think it was my fault because I didn't really understand what confirm meant in this context, but
no, I can appreciate that. Maybe if we could bring up on screen page 59 of the agenda.
So I'll give you the opportunity to speak to your report now if you'd like. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So I didn't prepare the report that is the first report that came to the committee, but I'm here to represent the resource management group of council. So we're basically the consenting arm of council. And we're seeking a decision from the operations committee as the requiring authority sort of arm of the council. And essentially, we have prepared our recommendation in accordance with the requirements of the Act. In essence, council has identified a need for a public work, and so has issued itself a notice requiring the land for a specific purpose. And in doing so, that land will sort of effectively be spot zoned for that purpose. It's a way to future-proof and give a bit more certainty around its ongoing sort of use, maintenance, and control of that asset. So just like to again draw attention to the decision that needs to be made is set out in section 168A4 of the RMA. So the operations committee may decide to confirm the requirement, modify the requirement, impose conditions, or withdraw the requirement. And we are recommending that the requirement be confirmed, subject to conditions to sort of manage the effects associated with the actual proposal.
All right, thank you for that. So do we have any clarification questions? A mover or a seconder?
If I may, Madam Chair, sorry, I'm a little bit unaware. I haven't been able to fully read this. So this property, do we own it or is it in someone else's ownership?
We do own and control the land at the moment.
Okay, so we're putting a notice of requirement on our own land.
That's correct.
Thank you. With that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bryant. We have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Cunninmonth is a seconder. Do you also have a question? Yes.
Through you, yes, I'll second that, Madam Chair, and through you ask a couple of questions. In the report you've got here, Hugh, is, sorry, Graham as well, you talk about a Richmond low reservoir. In other places you don't mention the low. So if you just clarify why the word low is there sometimes. And secondly, there's a house to be bowled over, is that correct?
Yes. Yes, the house will be bowled over, yes.
Yep. And have we got room on that site for a second reservoir in the future?
Yes, we do.
Yes, I can comment on the low. I mean, theoretically, it doesn't need to be in there. The plan long term was for a higher reservoir up the hill. But at this point in time, we're looking to put a pump station at that reservoir to pressurise the rest of the properties up the hill. You're given understand the geotechnical issues of putting reservoirs up on the side of steep hills like the Richmond Ranges. And I think at this point in time, it's probably more cost effective to, rather than put a high level reservoir in, is to actually pump from the low level. So really the low could be taken out and just be a reservoir that we're putting there, and then we progress from there.
Councillor Greening. Councillor Greening?
Yeah, just wondering whether neighbouring properties have been made aware of this or have been spoken to, or whether we've got any feedback from neighbouring properties.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yes, so the application, or the note that when the notice was issued, it was accompanied by various technical reports. And one of those was a landscape assessment that identified that some temporary effects might be minor. And then because of that, they recommended that the application be publicly notified. So that was ended up being publicly notified on the 16th of August. And there was also a letter dropped to specifically identified neighbours. And we didn't actually receive any submissions, neutral, opposed, or in support. And so because of that, we made a staff recommendation and decision that we could proceed to the Operations Committee today without a public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, it would appear we have no further questions, and the resolution has been moved by Deputy Mayor Bryant and seconded by Councillor Kinninmont. So I'm going to put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, that is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Blair and Graham. And then we're going to go to the designation for Bell Island Wastewater Treatment Plant. And so who do we have for that one?
I'll be speaking to that one again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blair. So I'll let you introduce your report.
Similar to the last one, we a council was a joint sort of notice issued by Tasman District Council and Nelson City Council from the Nelson Regional Sewerage Business Unit to designate the water treatment plant at Bell Island. This one's a little bit different. There's no physical works associated with this designation. So in essence, it's and the site has already got a special zoning as far as I'm aware. But this will probably provide a little bit more certainty in regards to sort of ongoing maintenance and any future work that they won't need a resource consent for any land use consents under Section 9 of the Act.
Yep, understand. Questions? Yes, Committeeman Bastaki.
I just had a question. So is that site at full capacity? Like is it like, does it need works?
I am not aware of the operational aspect of that asset. I'm sorry.
And then I just wondered, so does that serve all of Richmond, that site, or just the lower Hutt, like Lower Queen?
Yeah, again, I'm not familiar with its operational.
All right, Mike, thank you. If you could cover those questions.
I might have missed the first one, but the second one, the Bell Island treatment plant serves the southern part of Nelson. So yes, Stoke, Tahunanui, through to Bishopdale Hill, serves the Waimea Plains, and it serves Mapua and Ruby Bay as well.
I think the first question is, was it at capacity?
No, it's got, in various parts, it's got varying amounts of capacity at this stage, but yes, so it's got a current consent and it's able to comply with those consents.
Thank you, Councillor Dowler, then Councillor Greening.
Happy to move, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dowler. So for moving it, do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dakey. Councillor Greening.
Yeah, good succinct summaries, by the way, of these two delegations. So okay to staff. One question I do have is we kind of have an understanding with iwi. So I'm just wondering whether there's been consultation with iwi, given you've indicated that we're basically bypassing any consent process by making it a designation.
Perhaps I could answer that. This is to help with the operation of the plant. There's ongoing iwi consultation regarding the discharge and the conditions of consent. All this does is allow the regional sewage business unit to add what is required to help with the operation of the plant without having to go through a separate consent for each time it does something. Having this notice of requirement in place gives them the powers to do things at the plant to help the plant be more effective and efficient, rather than having to apply for a consent every time they modify or do something.
Yeah, so my question is, have we consulted iwi given that exactly that we're not going through the consent process using designation? So have we consulted iwi about this?
I'm not sure. I have to ask. They had who were there yesterday, so I'm not sure if that was discussed. We're not having it there today. In fact, it's on right now, so I'm not sure. I can't answer that question. Sorry, Councillor.
Councillor, I can partially answer that. So I'm not sure if the actual notice that was issued is attached to this agenda today, but as part of that, it did make quite clear that the pre-lodgement consultation was sought with iwi who had statutory acknowledgements in the Nelson Tasman locality, and the following information.
Was there a response to that? So was there a response to that notice?
Just going through that notice. Yeah. We got as part of that, there was feedback received from Ngāti Tama and Ngāti Kuia. And I understand they took that feedback on board in putting forward the notice.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's all I need to hear. Thank you.
Councillor Hill.
I've changed my mind, but I do note that 11.1, it says that the applicant consulted with iwi in regard to the proposal, and it's got a little bit there about it. But my other question, I think, is not so helpful now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hill. All right, so did we move? Oh, we did too. Okay, so all right. So the resolution has been moved by Councillor Dowler and seconded by Councillor Dakey. So I'm going to put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, and that is carried. Blair, thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Chair.
Right, John and Glenys, your moment has come.
Oh, can we change it again?
No, wait till he gets into the thing.
Okay, Chair, should we?
All right, so we're on to libraries and community partnerships. So councillors, this is page 199 of LG Hub. So over to you. Thanks, John.
So I'll just open up. You saw through the long-term plan and also, I guess, through these reports, how important these services are to our community. So I just wanted to take the time, just as usual, just to recognise the team. Janet is knee-deep in our CRM Harikiki digital project at the moment, so I'm standing in for her. And just a quick apology on her report. We've had a few issues, and it's really around timing, really. So I'm apologising. We don't like late reports coming in. So I'll just try and give you a few headlines from Janet's report, and then I'll hand over to whoever's up next, which I presume will be Glenys. Look, in terms of those inquiries, I guess the top three we're seeing at the moment is around utilities. So these are the main contacts we receive on utilities, and it tends to be around roads, water and refuse in that order. And the top three in other areas are around building assurance, which is really around building consenting, finance, which will be about rates, and resource consent. So we're seeing a big upturn in the inquiries in those two areas of building assurance and resource consenting, which is good news. We're still seeing AA delivering good revenue. We are still doing some work to really understand cost versus revenue on that one.
And I'll probably come back to you at some point on that. And on the last page, I point you to the comment from the Citizens Advice Bureau, and it's something that I've been pushing quite hard to try and get different services and different people into our buildings. So it's not just about coming and paying your rates and talking about dogs. It's much more than that. So you can see the response from CAB. And I think there's going to be some more opportunities in this regard, probably in the next 6 months, hopefully, where we can broaden some of that as well and make better use of our space. Quickly, I suppose the other thing to understand is we have this view that everyone does everything online, and our counter transactions have actually increased significantly. So be really conscious of that. So I'll leave it there if there's any specific questions. If not, I'll hand over to the team on my left.
Thank you. So we normally do these in sections. So on the customer services update, which was one of the late papers on LG Hub, any questions or comments? No, it would appear not. I do note on para 1.1.4, overall customers are very positive about our team, and it really makes our day when the staff receive compliments. So that's great. Thank you. All right, so that will move us on then to libraries. Glenys, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any updates, so I'm just going to take this as read. Happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Greening.
Just a question on the Prow website upgrade. What's the budget for that and timeline for that?
Timeline is we are in testing phase at the moment, or just moved into testing phase. So it really will just be within the next few months. The budget, I'm not sure what the overall budget was. We contributed $4,000 to it. The majority of the expense has been paid for by Nelson City Council.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. Any other questions on libraries? No, thank you very much, Glenys. And community partnerships, Lani.
Yeah, kia ora everyone. I'll just take my report as read. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Greening.
More a general question, Chair. At the start of the triennium, we raised the question of improving or consolidating or making more efficient the grants process. And I'm just wondering what progress has been made on that, given we're over halfway through the triennium.
Thank you. I'll just hand that over to John. Thank you.
So there's a piece of work kicking off actually before Christmas around scoping that piece of work. So we should get something to the strategy. I think it'll be going to one of the committees, I'm not sure where, but it's certainly on the work plan. We just need to get through a few bylaws and the like before we could kick into it.
So
but
I take it before the end of the year, is that what you're saying?
Pardon?
Before the end of the year is what you're saying?
That's when we're starting the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Deputy Mayor Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, Lani. I see a little bit about the Youth Council actively promoting an upgrade to the school crossing. Have we got the support of our engineering team in that as well?
Through you, Chair, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure they have been contacted, but I can follow that up.
Thank you. That'd be great.
All right, councillors, so we do have a resolution to receive the report. And that's moved by Councillor Ellis and seconded by Councillor Maru. So if there are no further questions, I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, it's carried. Thank you very much. That now takes us to the Community Infrastructure Oh, okay. Oh, no. Well, okay. I'll tell you what we'll do. We will go to information services. Sorry, Peter, just about had you. It's musical chairs this morning. Information services activity report on page 185. Thank you, Peter. Over to you.
Yes, good morning, everybody. So I'll take the report as read and open up for questions in a moment. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. One is that the Kahurangi CRM project is now moving forward into the build stage. So we're all very busy, not only within IS, but elements of the business as well, between now and end of March. 4 days a week out of 5, we're building the system. And what I'm hoping in the new year is that we'll bring a little bit of a demonstration to you of what the customer system and the front-end digital portal that our customers will be able to use. We'll give you a chance to have a look at that. So I'll bring that in the new year. We're also making good progress with several of our ongoing business projects for the council, including the water consent metering as we head into the summer. Our flood graphs on the website, we've solved a capacity issue with that, and we've got a new way of delivering those for customers when we have extreme events, and one or two other things as well. We've also kicked off our data and insights program, and so we brought Mike Pratt along today. Mike is our head of data development and architecture. It's a heck of a job title, but he can give you a few words on what the data and insights work stream is.
Thank you, Mike. Yep.
Yeah, kia ora koutou everyone. As Pete said, I'm the head of data development and architecture. I'm also the sponsor for the other digital innovation program, the data and insights piece work. And look, I realise for a lot of you, perhaps it's the first time you've heard of this one. I'll just run through what we were trying to win with this program, because I think that's important to start out what we're going to win from it. It's around trusted data. And we've got 4 areas that we want to achieve, and it's for our customers and residents. It's right first time. When you ask, you get good quality information, and you're not coming back all the time to get it. But that's whether you're calling in the front desk or you're online or any other means. There's also a big win for our staff, and we surveyed our staff, and it's called speed dating, but we asked them what their challenges were. It's really hard to find the data because it's across our business groups and it's across multiple systems. That's the challenge you want to solve. So when we go and find it, the idea of a hub, and we're confident and trusted that that data is there. One which is really appealing as well is our risk position. Not all of our data is good, but some of it, at least we know how old it is or what data is missing or duplicated. We can work with that, and that will inform our risk and decision-making processes as well. So we'll be in a better position to actually say, okay, how do we manage that and mitigate those challenges, but understanding the quality of information. And the last one, which is, excuse me, ties into, we want to get efficiency gains on that, because good data means that we can do things faster. We can automate a lot more of our processes as well and make things just a bit slicker. Project's really well underway at the moment. We've gone through, as you saw in the paper, we've gone through our strategy, and we have 5 pillars. We're executing on that, and where we're delivering into that, we recognise it ties in nicely with our Kahurangi CRM program. So we're trying to really up the ante on what does good customer information look like, and how does it relate to all the services that they consume off the council. So we're working forward on that. There's a big team behind that to get the quality measures right, the governance right, and improve our skilling. So that's a really short snapshot from me about that program, but I'm really happy to take any questions anyone has.
All right, thank you very much. So I shall hand it over for any questions. We've got Councillor Maru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's just the fine line on page 194. It says DNI is not over budget. The budgets are not inflated. This needs updating. Does that mean that the project budget that you're working with just hasn't reflected the annual plan budget? So it's no change to the annual plan budget?
Yeah, to the chair, I can answer that. So yes, we're in the process of that setting up after the start of a new long-term plan year 1, and so it takes a bit of time for the financial system to catch up with the inflation and carry forwards. So that means there's a period of time where a little bit we're not sure where we are with some of our budgets, but it's down to like a small amount.
And then the other thing I'm looking for the time, whether I'm sitting around the table or not, where easy information and good data is really accessible. Have you still got the support for existing systems? Because I saw Councillor Ellis was frustrated today. I'm threatened to throw this thing out the first floor a few times. So whatever works with our tablets, is there issues that are getting fixed, or is everything else just being pushed aside for the new project and development? Because these frustrate me constantly.
Yes, we do have our what we call our business as usual program. You'll be aware of the service desk. I've certainly seen Councillor Maru up there on occasion, but they can help with these. We understand that, you know, there's a little more complexity around having multi-factor authentication. A lot in the digital program alongside Harakiki and alongside data and insights. We have invested in our cybersecurity measures to improve cybersecurity. On the one hand, there's a little bit of frustration when things do get out of sync with your multi-factor and your password, but it's in a cause of protecting against things like cybersecurity breaches.
Thank you. Councillor Greening.
Yes, thanks. Just looking at para 6.5 and also then on page 192, which kind of I thought I assume are semi-related, but you indicated there, at least on page 192 in the
Councillor Greening, I'm just going to
well, you
interrupt you there
indicated
because
that
Councillor
rephasing of
Greening.
CRM means.
Councillor Greening, I'm just going to interrupt you there because you're breaking up in the council chambers. And so maybe if you just flick your camera off and you'll need to repeat your question, please.
So I'm just looking at page 192 and para 6.5, which I think are semi-related. It just related to the statement on page 192, noting the dashboard, which I was saying was quite good, but went outside the page, which was a bit unfortunate. Will you make mention of CRM rephasing, both in 6.5 and in that risk element, and indicate that there are issues on rates levels in the next annual plan for 2025-2026? So are you looking to rephase and put that pressure on, or because I'm also reading in other areas that you're operating within budget? So clarification would be useful.
Sure, yeah, I can answer that one. So I mentioned this last meeting and highlighted this. Yeah. So what happened is when we planned the LTP, we based our cash flow on what we knew at that time of what the likely phasing of the CRM would be. In the intervening time, we've signed up the contract with HCL and the program has come forward. So the budget is, we're within the budget of the program overall, so there's no budget overspend concern, but the spend is earlier. So we're not sure whether that's a material impact yet on the current year or next year for the annual planning process. That's something we're working through with the finance team. I've alerted them, I've given them the information I've got. So we're just working to work through that.
All right, so it's work in progress. Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Further to that, so when will we have an idea of what impact that is going to have?
That'll be a question for the finance team. We're working with them as amongst everyone else. So I'm conscious that the number I provide is amongst many other numbers and they can collectively add up to a problem or not. So I don't have that visibility, I'm afraid. So I'm just signalling from my point of view that this piece of work is coming forward. I don't know whether that's the impact on the wider whole.
Peter, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, and as Chris indicated, the number's not large, so the impact on rates is not going to be a material effect, we don't believe. We've also got other levers in the project we can pull around scope and timelines, so we're looking to make sure there isn't an impact.
Thank you. Chris?
So my brain's also caught up with myself a wee bit too. So there's other parts of the programme we're looking at possibly rephasing, largely through our own capacity more than anything else. That's in the cloud workspace. And so there's a conversation yesterday about do we shift some of that work out. So what I'm expecting early next year is we'll start to see how the other projects are shaping up. And history tells us that by the end of the year, we're often underspending in some areas and over in others. So not a huge concern right now. So I'm estimating on best efforts and, if things go that way, but I think it will drop a wee bit. And the other point as well is that the DIP is debt funded OPEX. So that I understand that has a different impact on rates as well.
Oh, we might hold you to that comment. It might drop slightly. All right, thank you very much. Look, we have a resolution up there on the board to receive the report. Moved by councillor Maru, seconded by councillor Ellis. So if there are no further questions, I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. And then that takes us to the community infrastructure activity report, which does start on page 101. And we will do this report in sections as usual. And so we shall just start off with the management comment. So Mr. Kirby, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just first of all, just wanted to welcome Bernard Robinson to our team. He's out on the field at the moment. It was pretty hard judging when we're going to be discussing this item this morning, so we couldn't hold him back for a whole morning. So some of you may know him, but when you're up our way, by all means, be introduced to him. Funding constraints. I've been reasonably stuck my head out a bit on the capital funding debt or rates comments. I'm just kind of intrigued at the scrutiny that Wellington City Council is going under when basically it's the same across all of councils in this country. There was some nervousness about councils funding depreciation back in the early 2000s. This council did the same thing, and basically all the renewals were funded from debt. And one of the challenges with raising debt is that you end up having to pay for it sometime. And so by criticising Wellington City Council for using rates rather than debt, I'm in favour of that because people pay, and debt can be used to the future, but you need to be conscious of the future that eventually you have to pay it back. And I think one of the problems we've got now is we've got very high interest costs that are hitting our operational budget every year. So I just make that comment there that the irony is that funding depreciation does eventually impact rates, whether it's now or into the future. So I'll leave my report there. And any questions? Thank you.
Councillor Dowler. Oh, was that? Oh no, you were scratching. Sorry. Yes, you may make a comment.
Just about the proposal we had before about the local water done well. Don't have an issue with what the consultants brought to it, but I always, well, tomorrow I fly to Wellington again, and for the last 3 years I go up there to a meeting, walk down the same piece of footpath to a restaurant. The first year I was up there, I counted 17 water leaks bubbling out of the footpath. Last year there was 26. I guarantee tomorrow, or afternoon or night when I get there, there'll probably be 50. So that's really telling me that Wellington Water really works well. And that's my biggest fear of a CCO here. Thank you.
All right, we don't need to pass any further comment on that. Thank you, Councillor Dowell. All righty. So that will take us to waters and waste update. Mike, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't actually going to say anything in the interest of brevity this morning. However, I can't resist saying that in Brightwater and Wakefield, we've just had 30% reduction in leaks. And we're about to hit Murchison, and we're expecting similar from what we're hearing and seeing around there as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just yes, I did notice that in your report. And I guess, I mean, how often do we do this program of work to find these leaks, or how long do we think it's been leaking, and do we have this number of leaks? And I mean, it was great information that you gave us, but it kind of just raised a whole lot of other questions in my mind.
Yeah, no, we've come a long way since waiting for it to leak and then going for it. We have, even our rural zones, we now have zones. So we will measure have flow meters to measure the flow in certain areas, and we know how many restrictors they've got, and then we can see if they're actually delivering more than they should be. And so one, that picks up any thefts or tampering, but it also picks up leaks. Within the town, we look at the low flows overnight, and you expect those to be really low. If not, then you know you've probably got a leak. And also, there are some leaks that are very hard to find. You can only find them with hearing devices. So by and large, we wait to see some indication of excessive water use, and then we bring in the experts to actually track it down.
So just so I mean, a 30%. I mean, that's potentially the difference between water restrictions and no water restrictions, isn't it?
Absolutely. In Wakefield, that was 400 cubic meters a day, which is 400,000 litres.
Right, okay. Councillor Greening, then Councillor Kinninmonth.
Just in relation to the earlier comment, because I did have my hand up, but I must have been overlooked. I do take on board what Councillor Dowler has observed. I certainly agree. The CCO model doesn't seem to be working in Wellington. And it's rather strange that all the criticism of Wellington City Council was not the reason why they appointed the observer. So I just make those observations. In terms of the leakage, which you've just talked to, Mike, that's great news. What's our average leakage rate at the moment then? It's 30% reduction, but from what, and what is our general leakage rate? And where can we make further improvements?
It varies significantly. I would say any leakage under 22, 25% is actually really good. You're probably unlikely realistically to get below about 18%. So between 18 and 25%, I would say is reasonably good. Because there's a lot of water that you use for various other purposes. It's not just leaks. We've got to account for the water that isn't sold as such as well, for flushing and hydrants and firefighting, etc.
So with Wakefield going down 30%, what's its average leakage rate now then?
I would say our best leakage we've had in the district was about 15% in Richmond a couple of cycles back, but it's more like 18% or so.
And with Wakefield, what's its leakage rate?
I couldn't tell you offhand at this stage. We'd wait for the year end and do the analysis at that stage.
But it's had a 30% reduction.
Yeah, we can see that in a month, but you need to look at it over the whole year to get to the seasonal fluctuation. And each year, as part of our annual report, we calculate the leakage for each of the clubs or schemes, I should say.
And when are we likely to get that annual view? Because that's the really critical one.
Around about September next year.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. Just to clarify, you weren't overlooked. There was no hand showing on the screen that I was looking at. Thank you. Councillor Kinninmonth.
Through you, Madam Chair, I have 3 questions. Page 105, the graph there on water supply jobs. Richmond spikes every year, this year and last year, up to this year, 200 jobs for September, where traditionally the other areas are down to 50. So what's happened in Richmond in September this year and last year? Page 105. Oh,
it's the water.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's the water supply jobs, Mike.
Water supply jobs September, year to date.
I'll attempt to answer that, Mike. I think it's probably because the Richmond has a lot more length of reticulation compared with the other schemes. So there's more jobs being required.
Oh, so we're going to send the leak detector people there.
No, these are jobs where requests have come through, like a leaking Toby or something like that. We have so many of them in the Richmond region, that Richmond town. That's why they have a lot more than because that's by number. It's not by percentage.
Yep. Okay.
Second question, Councillor Kinninmonth.
Page 106. Defects. I've sat around this table now a few times and we talk about blockages from wet wipes and things like that. Do we not actually record the number of blockages caused by wet wipes?
Yes, we do. Are you talking about the wastewater defects or the stormwater?
Wastewater
because there's blockages in both. So under item 140, there's the wastewater blockages, and they haven't changed much between this year and last year.
Okay, I'll look into that. I've obviously missed it. Page 100. That just says blockage. Doesn't say by what, it could be fat.
Oh, we don't know. It's just, we only have one blockage for a defect. We don't differentiate between the various types of materials causing
That's
it.
what I was wondering, whether you don't differentiate.
Oh, it's normally all bundled together. It's fats, oils, grease, clothing, underwear, you name it, towels.
It's stop.
Yeah, that's
And I'm stopping there.
Clause 411 on page 111. No, I haven't got 111. A 200mm PVC pipe, 30 years old split. Pipes are normally around 80 to 100 years. Are we developing some sort of fault with these pipes that are 30 years old, should be still in good service for another 50 years? And are we going back to the manufacturer saying the product not fit for purpose?
Being Thorpe Road, I suspect what happened there quite a few years back, they scraped some of that road off to rebuild it. This is going back quite a few years when the pipes are still quite new. So a lot of these roads and these pipes rather than Thorpe Street actually have very shallow coverage and they tend to break more often. And also we've got a number of instances where we've got the old blue brutes still in parts of those. Most of Thorpe Street has now been replaced and we tend to bury them a bit deeper if we can, if it's not gravity fed. But yeah, that's the main cause for that.
That's it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, councillor Walker.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm also on page 111 and it's about the wastewater and there's a comment there. The Motueka wastewater treatment plant membranes are fouling again, resulting in reduced throughput by the plant. That's quite concerning. The more concerning part for me is where's our solution on how we're moving forward? Like, it's great to make that comment and to advise us. What's the way of mitigating the problem?
The problem has been trying to find out what the problem actually is, why it keeps on fouling. And our suspicion is it's from the private bores, the level of iron in the bores. We don't get the same, anywhere near the same level of iron in the council's water supply. And of course, when that comes from the private water supplies, ends up in the wastewater, that iron continues on through the plant. And we know, because I know Nelson City, for example, they have issues with iron and manganese with their membranes as well. And it seems increasingly like the iron has a deposit on the membranes and starts blocking, needs a lot more cleaning. Of course, the more it gets cleaned, the more it gets damaged and it has a reduced life. So I don't think those membranes have even been in there 2 years yet. And they likely next year or two, they're going to need to be replaced again. At this stage, we hadn't planned to replace them for 3 years. I've just signed off a trial today to look at, and we shouldn't have it running in the next few weeks, a high flow ultraviolet filter treatment. It's not as susceptible to turbidity and solids and so on. It can knock back the viruses and bacteria and so on a lot more effectively at a high speed rate. It does need a bit more filtration than the membrane does, but it won't be prone to blocking as much. So we're going to be trialing that over the next few months. And that either will be a backup to take the pressure off the membranes or ultimately totally replace the membranes.
Awesome, thank you for that response. I guess I just have one further question, is the iron level. So have we got more bores, or why would the iron levels be?
Because the private bores use private bores, most of which are barely a couple of meters underground, very shallow, a lot of runoff, and that sort of material is in those upper layers.
That's historical.
Yes.
If that's So I struggle to understand why we've got a problem with the level of the iron, because it's not like you can say we've put a whole heap more bores in, which is creating more of a problem. But I am glad that you've come up with a solution on a way of, you know, the ultraviolet to try and reduce, hopefully, the problem.
We haven't used membranes before, that's why. The membranes are new. This is, I think, the third round of membranes we've replaced now. And they've been an issue pretty much from about the second year they've been in place.
Right. Pondering, Councillor Walker. Councillor Dakey.
Question about stormwater, Chair. Are we doing stormwater now or? Okay. Take it from 4.27, which is talking about the level of service and the channels, cutting the grass, that sort of thing. Just a question, not particularly about that, but it relates around the channels, the build-up of debris by culverts. Our monitoring of that, what systems do we have in place? I'll give you two examples. One would be Templemore Ponds, where if you were to observe it, you might say there's a build-up there. And the other one might be down, say, Bait-Up Drain by Waimea Village, where residents would say there's a lot of material in front. We're concerned that that could flood. Do we have a monitoring for that level of service for clearing those culverts? And where are we at with that this year?
I couldn't tell you specifically for those ones, but yes, we have a pre-storm check that we go around to all these sites most likely to block up and cause overflowing issues and areas if they should block the channels or the culverts or the pipes or drains, whatever. And those are done on a regular cycle when there's a storm event coming. Often after a storm event, we will clear them as well if there's been enough build-up in that time. But it's like a lot of things like sumps as well, and I'm sure Jamie will be similar with his culverts. We rely on reports. We don't have the resources to inspect every one of these sites. So we only look at the most at-risk sites.
Just to follow up, so I've had residents who say they perhaps have requested inspection and they've been, whether it's true or not, because you get different stories, but they've had the reply that funding's not available or resources are not currently available to come and do this work. That might not be actually what was said, but that's what I've had relayed to me about some of these areas. So I would be particularly interested in making sure that we do have the resources to go out and at least inspect and complete that loop for people. Just, I mean, that's what I'm hearing, whether it's true. You know, you get different levels of service requested, but I would really hope that we are answering and completing the feedback to the people and saying, if we're not going to do it today, we have noticed it's built up and this is when we're going to do it. So thank you.
Richard wants to make a comment.
This is a perennial question. We're about to discuss the quarterly report on the next council meeting, and you will note that the reactive maintenance in all three activities is a lot higher than budget, simply for what you've just raised. The question that I have, and I suspect the answer is correct, we don't have the resources or the funding to go around and check these things all the time. If a request comes in and we think it's as urgent, if it's one of the ones that I know the critical points, like the ones you've raised, we would inspect those. But we have to be really conscious about not spending too much time on that because there is a cost associated with that, and we're trying to fiscally manage the budgets that we've got in these challenging times. So there are going to be times when you just have to say, yep, that's absolutely right. We don't have the funding or the resources at this stage, but if it's critical, we will deal with it. Yeah.
Councillor Butler, then Councillor Greening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My just question relates to overland flow paths. And I thought I heard the consultant say this morning something about overland flow paths on private property being separated from overland flow paths on public property. Was I right in that? And so I'm interested to know, and you don't need to get a sort of full answer now, but what is our relationship with private property when it comes to overland flow paths? You know, I would say it's probably applies to Motueka, and I know it applies to, you know, Takaka, just because this is obviously going to probably have implications with the future, you know, arrangements for local water done well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because they're not always clearly marked or have the correct easements over them. But and the flow path, it's often a drainage pattern that's there. It's a natural drainage course, and people can't block them up. So they've got to keep those clear. But often when a subdivision, the developer will create new drainage paths, and those will generally have easements over them, and we'll be responsible to keep them clear. But there are a number that are going through private properties that have got nowhere else to go. And if they block those up, then they'll end up going through houses and so on as well. It is quite fraught.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Councillor Greening.
Yeah, certainly endorse the comments of Councillor Dykey. And this is a broader funding question which we discussed in the LTP, but I do think we need to revisit that stormwater investment. And yes, I do hear from council staff when we raise these issues from councillors, from the public. Quite rightly, they push back on the fact that we don't have any resources, there is an insufficient budget, and that's because council's chosen to do that. So I understand the tension that staff are operating in, given the governance direction they've been given. I'm going to keep on emphasising that we need to lift our investment in stormwater because it is a big issue for a number of residents, and Waimea Village is one of them. Can I say as an update, bouquet to staff member Greg Bennett. He has been very clear in his communication with Waimea Village and is trying to manage the tension with the finances and deliver what needs to be done for Waimea Village, which is there is a real risk of it flooding, and the community has been taking photographs, fortunately, of what are really minor rain events last week, a week ago, which caused one of the roads in the Waimea Village to be submerged underwater. So to Greg's credit, he's trying to instigate some spraying in the next 2 weeks. This is more an update for Councillor Dykey. And I understand that they are going to employ an excavator to extract some of the plant life that probably the sprays are probably not able to remove. But again, this is an ongoing issue and people are very anxious about this, and they've raised it numerous times in feedback sessions to council in terms of adequately funding and protecting their homes from flooding before we start spending money on entertaining them. And I think that is something that this council really needs to revisit. So bouquet to Greg for Waimea Village. I think more could be done, and he acknowledged that, but he doesn't have the funding to do it, which is the culvert clearing, which clearly does need to be cleared. And we really need to look at properly investing in our stormwater system because otherwise people's homes will flood. And that costs them money and probably has implications for their own insurance. They pay rates for us to do our job and protect their homes, and we should be. So I look forward to a future discussion around stormwater investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Greening. All right, thank you, Mike. I think we'll move on now to Russell with the program delivery update report, which starts on page 122. Over to you. Thanks, Russell.
Thank you. Just a few updates on projects and support we've written. One is Dex Reserve is complete with the official opening tomorrow. The other one is Port Tarikoe Phase 2, which is the Sheepfold Wharf and Ramp, is officially finished too, and it's a month ahead of schedule. And then we're going to start the building block on Monday.
Excellent. All good news.
Any questions?
Yeah, Councillor Daikie.
Yeah, thank you, through Chair. Easby Park Stormwater Works, was that previously a program in there in this delivery, or is it dropped off or?
Still there. We had Alexander Hospital, we couldn't do some work there, so we require permission to go on private land, and so we're doing some other smaller works to ease the flooding.
So the Easby is part of that wider. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kinnermont.
Page 130, project 1188, which is Redwood Valley Water Supply Upgrade. Is it worth giving an update to the Community Association or is it a bit too early for that?
I'll default to Mike because he does that.
If they still had a rural water supply committee going, that would be the appropriate one. That's where we've reported it in the past. But in recent years, they haven't had a body for us to report to.
I could give you the name of a chap who is the chair of the community association. He's got a database that he sends information out to.
So is that for the Redwood Valley?
Yes, Redwood Valley. Gordon.
Yeah, no, okay, no, I was just going to clarify because you're talking about the water committee and councillor Kinnamont is talking about the community association. So they're two different entities. So if councillor Kinnamont wants to give you the details of the chair of the community association, then whether or not there are people who are interested in the water, I don't know, but you'll have to work that through. Anything further, councillor Kinnamont?
No, thank you.
Councillor Maru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable asking this, but project 1531, the purchase of land in Tapua, I thought it was going on the old site, and then there's some issues in terms of the status of the old building. I just don't want to see another Golden Bay scenario here. So either Tapua communities behind the feasibility study and a plan, or the community hasn't decided yet. I'm looking, I know Stu's not here, but to the councillors on that ward, I'm just a little bit uncomfortable that.
John, you'll need to come to the microphone. Yep.
Yeah, I can probably help on that. I probably won't go into detail, but we're looking at, we're aware of the constraints. We're going to do a workshop with council, hopefully before Christmas, just to outline some of those issues we're facing. So we're well aware that we don't want this to go south, north, or whichever way. Okay.
I had a discussion with Deputy Mayor Bryant about that before the meeting. What he indicated to me was it might be slightly misleading in the wording that they're not looking at additional land. It's the land, but it's not currently owned by the TDC. It's owned by the Tapua District's community organisation. So yeah, yep, all good. All right. Doesn't appear we have anything further, Russell. So thank you very much, which takes us to Nick for property update, page 158.
Tēnā koutou, Madam Chair. Take my report as read, and any questions?
No, all right. I think we're all good there. Thank you, Nick. And that will then take us to roading. Jamie, thank you very much. Page 160.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I'm happy to take it as read and answer any questions.
Councillor Dakey.
Very quick, just for my clarification. We've got some works coming for Wensley Road, some rebuilding of the road. Am I right in understanding the treatment will be one part, and then there's a bit of a gap in another part, that it's not a, obviously, so the scope there, because we are not able to do that segment in between, is going to be a bit in the middle that doesn't get done. Have I interpreted the works here right?
Through the chair, yeah, correct. At this stage, the design and investigation that was done has shown that the highest priority is to do two discrete parts with a gap in the middle, kind of between Surrey Road and the corner down towards West Ave. Yeah. I mean, it's just, we have to prioritise the budget where we can.
Yep. I understand that, but obviously we're going to relay that story, because the question, if we go down that road, will be from the community, is you left a bit in the middle. Even though it's a relatively long bit, they're going to say, well, what about the bit in the middle? Why don't you just do it all? So just passing that message through, if that's the road we go down, that would be great. Thanks.
Councillor Kinnamont.
Very last question from me through the chair. Can I just go back to Nick Chin's report, and a big thank you for the firewood weekend. The members of the community have come up to me and said what a huge improvement from last year, Keep up the great work and well done. So to the people involved from the community, thank you.
Thank you. It's good to get good feedback, Nick. Any more questions on roading? Oh, okay, yes.
Earlier in the meeting, councillors, through you, Madam Chair, Stuart Bryant asked Lani about the crossing of the State Highway in Murchison Youth Council. I've just spoken to Jamie, and Jamie said we have sent a letter of support to NZTA because it is a state highway for them to put a race crossing in. So just to let you know that's happened.
All right.
Sorry, I'll just clarify that we advocated for a safer crossing. Yeah, whether that's the question of whether it could be raised is a difficult one due to the high volume of trucks and the noise that it might create.
A question, Jamie, from me. So just thinking back to the AI presentation this morning, which of course was very interesting. When do we think that Downers might deploy that technology?
So they are also working in that space already. Yes, I attended a conference earlier this year, and there were a couple of organisations all talking about this very tool. So they're all trying to perfect it. So it's great that there's some competition and some energy going into that space.
Oh, very exciting. All right. Well, thank you. Look, our last section of this report is with you, Grant, page 173. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just draw your attention to the Murchison Sport and Rec Centre. There's a heading missing there on some information that we received from the management team down there, which they provided a bit of an update, but it's the one with the basketball, etc. on it. That's from the Murchison Community Centre. And the other thing was that I just wanted to draw your attention to the Taka Bike Skills Park. We've been having some really productive conversations with Fonterra, and they are keen to gift us about 1.3 hectares of land opposite the treatment plant there, Taka. So that's really positive. We've provided a bit of an initial idea of what we want there in terms of a layout, and we hope to bring something back to council on that probably during the annual plan process about how we go forward. But I think we're making good progress there.
Gosh, I almost thought you were going to say they were donating us 1.3 million, not 1.3 hectares. All right, thank you. We'll pass it over for any questions. If I could just start with a comment. You know, you talk about community wellbeing. I just want to reflect on the opening of that playground in Fortners-Bosch. It is absolutely incredible. People love it. I've not heard one single negative comment come about that playground. Even the people in the retirement home love it because they get to see people out there enjoying themselves. So it just shows what you can do to actually boost that wellbeing across the community. Amazing. Thank you so much. All right, Councillor Hill.
Kia ora, Chair. Thank you. On here, the budgets for the maintenance of halls in the district. Just want to note that I think that our process around that seems to work really well. I was out in Pakawa Hall not that long ago, and it's just looking fantastic in there, and the sort of the pride and joy of little local communities. So bouquets are being handed out today a little, so I'd certainly give one for that. But I have been thinking about should we get the, big emergency event where we've been told we need to be self-sufficient for a month, there'll be no one coming. And some of those community meetings that are happening about that and people getting together, working out, who's off grid and who's got a generator. And I thought it might be helpful if we had in at some of our halls, particularly Pakawa and perhaps Bainham, the facility for people to be able to plug a generator in and run the power in there. So that's something I'm not sure where to take that to, but I think it'd be great to get it added into hall spending. I think there's value in that. Good news about the Fonterra negotiations grant. This has been ongoing for a long time, and just wanting to be clear around the process once we're indicating how things sort of will be laid out and what involvement there would be from within the community around design and all that. That's a way we go about that. We've got a chap, Carl, of course, who you'll be aware of, who's been very involved in that project. So wouldn't want to see us going ahead and cooking something up without appropriate input.
Just through the chair, yep, I hear what you're saying, Councillor Hill, and we did a little bit of preliminary work last financial year on this, and Steve Richards has continued that on, really for the purposes of providing Fonterra with some assurance that if they did, give the land, that we would, deliver something on there that, was going to look good and was positive. But we certainly aware that we need to engage with the community on that. So yeah, we're just trying to get things moving. But as I say, we also need to get involved with the annual plan process on this as well.
Great, thanks, Grant.
Thank you. And Jane, did you want to make a comment about halls?
Yes, I could. Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, we work quite closely with Kathy King, who is the coordinator for space for civil defence. And she has a list of all of our halls, and she has personally inspected them all to see what they could be used for and how safe they are, and they are already on that list. And also as part of our annual projects, a lot of the older ones, we've upgraded the wiring so that they can be ready for use. So a lot of that work that you were hoping would be implemented is actually already underway.
Oh, great news. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Kinnermont.
Thank you. This is probably from you too, Jane. Page 176, projects that are being deferred. A lot of them all halls. They're in our Metro Waimea ward sort of thing. Oh, and Golden Bay. Are you intending to tell these people when the work's going to be done, or how do we communicate it? Because if you don't do it, they'll attack us.
Thank you. So the normal process is about this time of year. I send out a letter to all of our hall committees to ask them for their wish list, I suppose you would call it, because there are budget constraints. Some years we're undersubscribed and we're able to say yes to everything. Other years we're oversubscribed and we have to select carefully for the benefit of the wider community. Some of these halls also manage their own funding, of which they have quite generous amounts that they're looking after on behalf of council. And so sometimes when they request something that perhaps could go back into operational, we let them know that they've been unsuccessful. Other things where I think there is benefit, but there's more work to be done before we get there, I let them know we'll look at that again next year.
Thank you very much. All right, councillors, we have got a resolution up there on the board, and passing this resolution is standing between you and lunch. Do I have a mover for that resolution? Moved Councillor Maru, seconded Councillor Kinnermont. If there are, Councillor Hill, I'm just checking, your hand is still up.
No.
Oh, no, it's down now. Thank you. So if there is nothing further, I shall put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody. We have got through a lot of information this morning, and it's appreciated that we've managed to get through it today. Councillor Hill, could I ask you to do our closing karakia, please?
Sure, Chair. Kara ki tātou, ki o hora ki marino, ki whakapapa pounamu te moana. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora. Thank you.